Chapter 639. An Ancient Demon Lord. Yi Xian looked at the pool of blood and asked softly, "Senior, why did you bring me here?" The sixth replied, "I won't hide it from you. Kid, I've been observing you for a long time. I feel that you're suitable to be a demonic successor. So I brought you here to join the demonic path." Join the demonic path. Yi Xian's expression froze. The sixth replied, "Are you interested?" Yi Xian asked, "Senior, what do you mean by join the demonic path?" The sixth replied, "It means to join the demonic orthodoxy and become a demonic successor." Yi Xian fell silent. Demonic? He knew too little about this so-called demonic. The sixth replied, "Let's talk about the benefits. First, you can absorb this pool of blood. It can change your body, allowing you to become a monarch. Second, you can receive the demonic path's inheritance. Of course, you might not be interested in most things, but there are two things you'll definitely like." Yi Xian asked, "What are they?" The sixth replied, "Grave, the fist of burial." Yi Xian asked, "Grave? Fist of burial?" The sixth explained, "The so-called grave is a treasure of the demonic race. Its function is a little evil. This fist of burial is the highest martial art of the demonic path. A single punch can bury everything in the world. It's very powerful." Yi Xian said in a deep voice, "Sir, is there any harm?" The sixth replied, "There is. Once you join the demonic path, you'll be more carefree. However, you're no different from joining the demonic path." Yi Xian fell silent. The sixth added, "I don't have much time. Give me an answer as soon as possible." Yi Xian replied, "Join the demonic path." At a time like this, he didn't want to think too much. Improving his strength was the most important thing right now. The sixth replied, "Go down." Yi Xian nodded. Then he leaped into the blood pool. As soon as he entered the blood pool, the blood in the pool started to boil. Ah! A heart-wrenching and lung-splitting shriek suddenly resounded in the spacious hall. At this moment, Yi Xian felt as if his entire body was being torn apart by the demonic blood. The sixth floor suddenly said, "Hold on a little longer. The ancient demon blood is going to enter your body. It will be a little painful." Yi Xian said painfully, "Senior, this isn't just a little pain." The sixth replied, "There's something even more painful." Yi Xian was speechless. The man on the sixth floor was right. Not long after, his skin felt like it was disintegrating bit by bit. The pain was indescribable. Yi Xian seemed to have thought of something and hurriedly asked, "Senior, my blood doesn't seem to reject this demon blood?" "The demon blood is changing your body, not your bloodline. That's why your bloodline won't reject it." Yi Xian nodded. "Understood." Just like that, time passed bit by bit, and the amount of ancient demon blood in the pool gradually decreased. Yi Xian's body gradually absorbed the demon blood, and as he did so, his body began to gradually transform. A day later, the ancient demon blood in the pool had been completely absorbed by Yi Xian. After absorbing the ancient demon blood, his hair gradually turned dark red, and his body emitted a strange red gas. At this moment, a powerful aura suddenly emanated from Yi Xian's body. This aura soared into the sky and caused the entire hall to shake violently. The sixth replied, "Xiao Ta, help him suppress it. Don't let him breathe. Expose his aura." The prison pagoda appeared above Yi Xian's head, and soon, the aura emanating from Yi Xian's body was completely absorbed by it. However, the aura emanating from Yi Xian's body grew stronger and stronger. Not only that, but Yi Xian's brows furrowed as a fainter demon imprint appeared between his brows. Gradually, the demon imprint became deeper and deeper, and in the end, it seemed to be formed from fresh blood. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly opened his eyes. Boom! A powerful aura shot into the sky, and the prison pagoda above Yi Xian's head shook violently. However, it still absorbed the aura. Yi Xian stood up. At this moment, he had undergone an earth-shattering transformation. His upper body was bare, and his veins were bulging, filled with explosive power. In between his brows, there was a demon imprint that looked like it was formed from fresh blood. Not only that, but there was also a blood-red gas floating around his body. "Demon?" At this moment the sixth replied, "You've already become a demon. and your body has a demonic nature. The so-called demonic nature is your true nature, and the demon will release your true nature. For example, you were originally very shameless and horny, but now, you may become even more shameless and horny. Yi Xian. The sixth replied, demon is human nature. It's the same logic as you swordsman's so-called pursuit of one's true nature. Right now, you need to control your demonic nature. After all, pursuing one's true nature doesn't mean that you can do whatever you want. We demons have our own moral boundaries. Yi Xian nodded. I understand. Demon? At this moment, he didn't feel any different after becoming a demon. The only difference was that his strength had greatly increased. Emperor physique. His current physique had reached the emperor realm. Moreover, he could feel boundless power in his body. This power wasn't external, but his own strength. Physical strength. Yi Xian sighed. He hadn't expected that his physique would reach the emperor realm before his cultivation. Emperor realm. The sixth replied. The ancient demonic blood in your body hasn't been fully absorbed yet. If you absorb it all, your physique can reach the next level. However, you can't continue to do so now, because your cultivation level is too low. It's not a good thing for your physique and cultivation level to be too far apart. Yi Xian nodded. That's true. As if thinking of something, he hurriedly asked, Senior, what about the grave and burial fist? The sixth replied, enter from the left. Yi Xian looked to the left, and there was a Xiao Dao. Yi Xian didn't think much of it and walked in. Yi Xian followed the Xiao Dao to the end, and at the end was a secret room. On the wall of the secret room, there was a portrait. The portrait was of a middle-aged man in a cloud-colored robe, holding a book in his hand, and exuding a calm and scholarly aura. Yi Xian sized up the portrait. Senior, this can't be you, right? The sixth replied. Do you have any questions? Yi Xian chuckled. No questions, no questions. As he spoke, his gaze fell below the portrait, and there was an ancient book and a storage ring. Yi Xian walked over and picked up the ancient book. Burial fist. Yi Xian asked softly, Senior, what level is this burial fist? Is it an unparalleled martial art? The sixth was silent for a moment, and then said, second to unparalleled martial art. Yi Xian asked, what level is this second to unparalleled martial art? The sixth replied, can't you ask fewer questions? Can't you just learn it directly? Yi Xian. The sixth continued, this burial fist will have a miraculous effect when used with your physique. As for the grave, at this point, he suddenly fell silent. Yi Xian looked at the storage ring, and his divine sense swept through it. Inside the storage ring, there was a grave without a name. Seeing the grave, Yi Xian frowned slightly. Senior, what is this? The sixth replied, it's a treasure of the demon race, and I heard that there's a person buried inside. I don't know who it is, but you should keep it. Who knows, the person might suddenly wake up one day and give you a surprise. Yi Xian's face darkened. A surprise? More like a scare. The sixth replied, keep it, it'll be useful. Yi Xian nodded. All right. Saying so, he put the storage ring into the prism pagoda. The sixth replied, go outside and cultivate this burial fist. I'll teach you. Yi Xian was overjoyed. All right. Saying so, he left the hall. Outside the hall, it was a vast expanse of gray. There was little spirit chi in the surroundings, and the sky was dark without a single ray of sunlight. Yi Xian asked, Senior, what is this place? The sixth replied, a place that's been forgotten by history. This place was once very prosperous, but unfortunately, no place can prosper forever. Even your chaotic universe will be destroyed one day. Yi Xian fell silent. The chaotic universe will be destroyed? He didn't have time to think about all that, because all he could think about right now was how to prevent himself from being destroyed. Yi Xian withdrew his thoughts, and he walked over to an empty space and said, Senior, how do I cultivate this burial fist? The sixth replied, the burial fist emphasizes on the word burial. What is burial? It's burial. When I execute this fist, it's either you bury me or I bury you. The method of cultivation is very simple. It's just use the strength of your body to circulate according to the meridians of the burial fist. However, every time you execute this burial fist, You'll need to circulate your profound energy through your meridians. So it might be a little painful. A little painful? Yi Xian asked. Senior, is it just a little painful? The sixth replied, yes. Yi Xian's face darkened. As if I'd believe you. However, he didn't have a choice, because he wanted to see how strong this burial fist was. His body was now at the Thearch realm, and if he cultivated a powerful fist technique, his battle strength would definitely multiply. If it's painful, then so be it. Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes, and a stream of energy started flowing through his body. It didn't take long for the energy to flow against his meridians. In that instant, Yi Xian's eyes opened, and his features contorted. Senior, it's very painful. The sixth replied, then cry. Yi Xian. Mystical energy flowing through his meridians felt like his meridians were being pierced by needles, and he really wanted to die. However, Yi Xian gritted his teeth and persevered. If he couldn't even endure this little bit of pain, then he could only wait for death. Soon, the space around Yi Xian began to tremble violently, and the veins on Yi Xian's right hand bulged as a powerful force gathered on his right hand. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian suddenly roared and punched forward. Boom! A few thousand feet away, a towering mountain collapsed. Not only that, but the ground around him also began to crumble inch by inch, and the crumbling spread out at a rapid speed. Chapter 640. In the field, even Yi Xian himself was stunned by his own punch. A single fist was so strong. At this moment, the sixth person's voice rang out. What are you so shocked about? Right now you're only using half of the burial fist's strength. Half of the strength. Yi Xian sucked in a breath of cold air. At this moment, he realized that the burial fist was countless times stronger than he'd imagined. Yi Xian hurriedly asked, Senior, how can I use the burial fist's full strength? The sixth person replied, practice. Furthermore, you have the power of the earth, and it can be used to support you. With the support of the power of the earth, the might of your burial fist will become even stronger. The power of the earth. Yi Xian was struck dumb. Then he said, can I? The sixth person replied, yes. Yi Xian stomped his right foot lightly, and a great path appeared. Soon, boundless power of the earth gathered in his body. About 15 minutes later, Yi Xian roared and punched out. Rumble! With a single punch, the space within a few kilometers was instantly destroyed and turned pitch black. Yi Xian was stunned. After a long time, Yi Xian finally regained his senses. This burial fist was truly heaven-defying. Yi Xian continued to cultivate. At this moment, Yi Xian was very excited, because his body was now at the Thearch realm. And with this burial fist, he could even fight against a Thearch realm martial artist. Or rather, he had the strength to kill a Thearch realm martial artist. Especially this burial fist. It was a fatal threat to Thearch realm martial artists. Continue cultivating. Yi Xian began to cultivate like a madman. He wanted to cultivate this burial fist to its limits. Just like that, after about 5 days Yi Xian stopped. At this moment, the place he was at had become a bottomless abyss. It was all caused by the residual power of his burial fist. The sixth person replied, I can barely do it now. Yi Xian asked in a low voice, Senior, who created this burial fist? How terrifying. The sixth replied, I created it. Yi Xian was stunned, and then he hurriedly said, So it was established by Senior. This is seriously too terrifying. Senior, I really admire you. The sixth replied, Stop flattering me, I won't fall for it. However, it's rare for you to say something sincere. You deserve praise. Yi Xian was speechless. At this time, the person on the 6th floor said, Let's go to the Great Void Sword Mound. Yi Xian nodded. All right. The 6th replied, Head south. Yi Xian rose on his sword and disappeared into the distance in the blink of an eye. In the air, Yi Xian looked down. At this moment, he discovered that there was no longer any sign of life in the entire world. This world should have dried up a long time ago. Yi Xian asked, Senior, what happened in your world? The 6th replied, Who knows? I've been imprisoned for a very long time. Yi Xian said in a low voice, Senior, how far is this place from the chaotic universe? The 6th replied, With your current strength, it might take you 30 years to return to the chaotic universe. Yi Xian. The sixth replied, the four-dimensional universe is huge, so huge that you can't even imagine it. The little girl in your chaotic universe wants to conquer the entire four-dimensional universe. I have to say, her idea is really impressive. Little seven, Yi Xian said in a low voice, Senior, do you think she can do it? The sixth was silent. Yi Xian smiled. I think, whether she can or can't do it, she will definitely do it. The sixth replied, no matter what, she is an incredible person. This little girl is very outstanding, and her speed of growth can only be described as terrifying. When we meet again, she might have reached a new height. Yi Xian nodded. So I have to work hard. Speaking of this, he seemed to have thought of something and chuckled. Senior, have you created any other martial arts techniques? The sixth replied, yes, but not suitable for you. Your top priority now is to improve your sword Dao and cultivate this fist of burial to the extreme. Your fist of burial still has room to grow. Yi Xian nodded. Indeed, biting off more than one could chew. Yi Xian sped up. After passing through a mountain range, Yi Xian felt a surge of sword intent. Great Void Sword Mound. Soon Yi Xian stopped. Not far in front of him was a mountain gate. Inside the mountain gate, there was nothing but ruins. Yi Xian walked in. Among the ruins, there were many swords scattered. Many of these swords had lost their spiritual qi. Clearly, they had been here for too long, so long that their spiritual qi had been exhausted. Yi Xian asked, Senior, is this the Great Void Sword Mound? The sixth replied, I didn't expect this place to become like this. Yi Xian glanced at the surroundings. It was very desolate, and there was no aura of life. The sixth replied, let's go in and have a look. Yi Xian nodded and continued to move forward. Soon, he arrived in front of a dilapidated hall. In front of the hall, there was a statue of a middle-aged man. The statue was a little dilapidated, and two of its arms were missing. Yi Xian looked at the statue and was about to speak when the sixth's voice resounded. Jian Taishu, come out. After a moment of silence, the statue before Yi Xian suddenly split open, and a middle-aged man appeared before Yi Xian. However, it wasn't a real body but an illusion. The middle-aged man's gaze descended onto Yi Xian. Fiend Lord? The sixth's voice resounded once more. Long time no see. The middle-aged man said, come out and meet me? The sixth replied, I'm not coming out. Jian Taishu, what happened to this world after I left? Jian Taishu looked up into the sky and said softly, disaster. The sixth replied, what disaster is it that even you can't resist? Jian Taishu shook his head. An unstoppable disaster. Jian Taishu was silent for a long time and then said, I have a condition. The demon lord said, what condition? Jian Taishu said, he must join my Great Void Sword sect. I don't expect him to rebuild the Great Void Sword sect, but the sword principle of my Great Void Sword sect must be passed down. As he spoke, he looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian nodded. I can do that. Jian Taishu nodded slightly. You are an extraordinary sword saint now? Yi Xian nodded. I came this time to learn how to reach the level of Sword God. Sword God. His current goal was to reach the level of Sword God. Jian Taishu said in a low voice. The level of Sword God requires comprehension, and of course an opportunity. Come with me. As he spoke, he turned around and floated away. Yi Xian hurriedly followed him. It didn't take long for Yi Xian and Jian Taishu to arrive at an old and shabby hall. There were 9 pillars within this hall, and every single one of them had a sword erected on it. They were swords at the Dao realm. Yi Xian's eyelids twitched when he saw these 9 swords. What great swords! At this moment, Jian Taishu, who was standing in front of him, suddenly said, the 9 pillars represent the 9 ancestors of the Taishu sword sect. Each of these 9 ancestors had once reached the level of extraordinary sword divinity. However, if you want to receive his guidance, it will depend on your own luck and fate. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. Within the hall, Yi Xian glanced at the surroundings, and it was extremely quiet. After a short while, it was still very quiet, and no one had come out. Yi Xian's face darkened. Senior, are they looking down on me? The sixth person said, I think that it's time for you to show off. Aren't you very eloquent? Let's begin. Yi Xian was speechless. P.S. It was a close shave, and I wasn't invited for tea. Chapter 641. Within the hall, Yi Xian glanced at the surroundings. There was no movement from the 9 pillars. Yi Xian thought for a while, and then bowed slightly to the people around him. Seniors, I'm an honest man. I don't know how to play those fancy tricks. If you think I'm good, please show yourself. If you don't think I'm good enough, I won't force you. There was still no movement. Yi Xian nodded. Sorry for disturbing you. With that, he turned and left. He left without hesitation. At this moment, a voice resounded from behind Yi Xian. Kid, why is your temper so bad? Yi Xian stopped. He turned and saw an old man standing in front of him. Yi Xian bowed to the old man. Please enlighten me, senior. The old man looked at Yi Xian. You want to break through to Sword God? Yi Xian nodded. The old man smiled. Do you know what Sword God is? Yi Xian shook his head. The old man said, Sword God is the god of swords. As soon as he finished speaking, he opened his palm, and a sword appeared in his hand. The old man smiled. Although the difference between Sword Saint and Sword God is only a single word, the difference between the two is like clouds and mud. If you want to break through to Sword God, the fastest way is to absorb the sword intent of others, and use it to prove your own sword Dao. As he said that, he looked at Yi Xian. There are thousands of sword Daos. Only by combining the strengths of all can you reach Sword God realm. Sword Dao is connected to the gods. This god doesn't refer to those so-called powerful experts in the legends, but yourself. A person is his own god. One thought connected to become a saint. 10,000 thoughts connected to become a god. Do you understand what I mean? Yi Xian nodded. Understood. The old man smiled. Young man, this old man can feel that your background isn't simple. However, this old man isn't interested. Our great void sword sect has been passed down for countless years, but we suffered a catastrophe many years ago. This is the calamity of our great void sword sect. The old man hopes that we can help you become a sword god. And after you accept the legacy of the Taishu sword sect, you can let it continue to be passed down in the future, so that the Taishu sword sect can be passed down in another way. Yi Xian bowed slightly. It's my duty. The old man nodded. We will release our sword intent, but whether or not you can become a sword god will depend on your own fortune. As soon as he finished speaking, the pillars in the surroundings suddenly trembled, and it didn't take long for 9 types of sword intents to appear in the hall. Yi Xian took a deep breath. Come on. As he spoke, he sat down cross-legged. Enlightenment. On the path of the sword Dao Yi, other than hard work, it also required frequent comprehension. Every time one's mental state improved, it would be of great help to the sword Dao. At this moment, he wanted to be enlightened. Using other people's sword Dao to improve his own sword Dao. Seeking proof. Yi Xian didn't dare to guarantee that he would succeed, but he had to work hard. Just like that, half a month passed. Half a month passed and Yi Xian still hadn't left the hall. Chaotic universe, city of order. A door suddenly opened, and a little girl walked out. This person was Xiaoqi. Xiaoqi looked at the horizon, her eyes closed, her left hand caressing the hilt of the sword at her waist. Not far from Xiaoqi, Nangongwan stood quietly. Other than her, there were also the 2 swordsmen, Xiangqing and Xiangyu. After a long time, Xiaoqi opened her eyes and asked softly, How is that Yi Xian? Yi Xian. Hearing Xiaoqi's words, Nangongwan's face changed. She realized that His Majesty really valued Yi Xian. Xiaoqi suddenly turned to look at Nangongwan. Nangongwan didn't dare to hide anything, and immediately recounted what happened that day, without exaggerating. After Nangongwan finished, Xiaoqi suddenly spoke. Nangong, how dare you interfere in my private affairs? Hearing this, Nangongwan's face fell, and she quickly got down on her knees. Your Majesty, this subordinate knows her mistake. Xiaoqi walked in front of Nangongwan, looking down at her coldly. Do I need your permission to make friends with others? The moment her words landed, a black-robed man wielding a scythe suddenly appeared behind Nangongwan. Nangongwan quickly lowered her head. This subordinate wouldn't dare. Xiang Qing and Xiang Yu also shook their heads. They could feel that His Majesty was truly angry. In truth, Xiaoqi rarely got angry. At this time, Xiaoqi waved her hands, and the black-robed man behind Nangongwan left quietly. Xiaoqi looked down at Nangongwan. You're my strategist, not my master. Whatever I do, you can listen, but you cannot interfere. You shouldn't interfere. Saying this, she shook her head. I've always felt that you're a smart person, and I've always seen you as a helper. But now, it seems that my trust in you has made you arrogant. After saying this, she turned around and walked away. Return to God Nation immediately, and let Shengguan Xianer come to my side. Hearing this, Nangongwan's face turned pale. At this moment, she knew that she was far away from the center of power in God Nation. Before this, she was Nangong Kingdom scholar, and everyone in God Nation respected her. Even Xiang Qing and other super experts respected her. This wasn't just because she was a kingdom scholar, but because she was Xiaoqi's confidant. Xiaoqi's confidant. Because of this, no one dared to disrespect her. She was proud of Xiaoqi, but now all her honor was gone. God Nation never lacked talents. Behind Nangongwan, Xiang Qing and Xiang Yu looked at her and shook their heads slightly. It had to be said that Nangongwan's decision had completely changed her fate. Inside the temple, Xiaoqi was sitting, and opposite her was a white-haired woman. Tendo looked at Xiaoqi, and her expression was extremely solemn. The little girl in front of her had become stronger again. The current Xiaoqi gave her a very dangerous feeling. Xiaoqi looked at Tendo. Have you thought it through? Tendo said solemnly. Do you know about the black-yellow great world? Xiaoqi was silent. At this time a woman walked in. The woman was wearing a lotus leaf dress, and she had delicate features. Shengguan Xianer walked to Xiaoqi's side and bowed slightly. Your Majesty, I found some information about the black-yellow great world. Xiaoqi nodded. Speak. Shengguan Xianer said. The black-yellow great world, according to the current situation of Celestial Arcanum sect, should be the most powerful world in the entire four-dimensional universe. Xiaoqi raised her eyebrows. Stronger than my God Nation? Shengguan Xianer nodded. Stronger than us. And this black-yellow great world is also a very, very dangerous world. Because in order to maintain enough spiritual energy in their world, they often plundered the spiritual energy of other universes. Since ancient times, countless universes have been plundered by them. Because of this, not only did they not decline, but they also became stronger and stronger. Moreover, they have the most advanced martial arts civilization in the entire four-dimensional universe. At this point, she paused slightly, and then said, in addition, after plundering the spiritual energy of many universes, they will also absorb other civilizations. It can be said that they have gathered the martial arts civilization of many universes. Xiaoqi nodded slightly. They did what I wanted to do, but I will not destroy other universes for the sake of the chaotic universe. Shengguan Xianer said solemnly, Your Majesty, there is that tombstone in the starry sky, and that tombstone is a transmission array. In other words, it is very likely that they will come to our chaotic universe, and then attack it. We must not be careless. Xiaoqi looked at Shengguan Xianer. What do you think? Shengguan Xianer pondered slightly, and then said, I suggest that we recall all the experts of our God Nation outside. Not only that, but also move some of our great arrays into the starry sky, just in case. Xiaoqi nodded. Yes. Shengguan Xianer said. Also, all the great families and sects have some old monsters that have disappeared for a long time. This subordinate suggests that Your Majesty can issue a divine decree to let all these old fellows come out of seclusion. Facing this fantasy great world, we cannot have the slightest contempt. Xiaoqi nodded. Yes. Shengguan Xianer said. In addition, Your Majesty also needs to recall those experts who are exploring outside, and tell them to rush back immediately no matter how far they are. Also, that city lord Yi must come back. Yi Xian. On the side, Tendo glanced at Shengguan Xian. What do you want him to come back for? To court death? Shengguan Xianer smiled. Your Excellency Tendo, do you really think that city lord Yi is simple? Tendo looked at Shangguan Xian'er. Besides that broken tower, is there anything special about him? Shangguan Xian'er said softly. Having that treasure is already very special. Hearing this, Tendo was silent. Shangguan Xian'er looked at Tendo. That treasure comes from the fifth dimension, and that treasure recognizes him as its master. Your Excellency Tendo, there are so many monstrous geniuses in the fourth dimension. Why does that treasure recognize him as its master? Is it just because his luck is good? Saying this, she shook her head. If he was lucky to obtain that treasure, then the fact that he is still alive proves that he is not simple. After saying this, she looked at Xiaoqi. Your Majesty, this subordinate took the initiative to ask Celestial Arcanum Sect to investigate City Lord Yi, and found that he is not simple. Xiaoqi asked, how is he not simple? Shangguan Xian'er said in a deep voice, Celestial Arcanum Sect can't see his fate. Even the old sect head can't know. He doesn't dare. The old sect head said that if he forcibly peeped, even if he could find out City Lord Ye's fate, something bad would definitely happen. That feeling was very strong, so the old sect head had to stop. Xiaoqi was silent. Shangguan Xian'er continued. In addition, according to the information I have, this City Lord Yi has not only obtained the recognition of the former God Lord of the God race, but also the recognition of the Underworld King of the Underworld race. These two former super overlords all recognize him. There is also another person, Jian Zizai. Jian Zizai. Xiaoqi raised his eyebrows slightly. She is still here? Shangguan Xian'er nodded. She is probably the person behind Yi Xian, but this subordinate is not completely sure. This City Lord Yi seems to have a lot of backers. However, what is certain is that this Jian Zizai has a close relationship with him. Jian Zizai. From the God race to this era, there were two super amazing geniuses. In front was Jian Zizai. Behind was Xiaoqi. As for who was more monstrous, no one knew. At this time, Tendo suddenly said, you are right, he has a lot of backers. This guy is just a second generation. He only relies on shouting when fighting. Shangguan Xian'er. Chapter 642. Within the hall. Seven suddenly looked at Shangguan Xian'er. Where is he now? Shangguan Xian'er said solemnly. Your Majesty, after City Lord Yi left that day, he returned to Divine Martial City first. At this moment, he is no longer in Divine Martial City. As for where he went, I don't know. Seven nodded. Contact him. Shangguan Xian'er bowed slightly. Understood, I will take my leave. After she finished speaking, she was about to leave. At this moment, Seven suddenly said, how is the Shangguan family now? Shangguan Xian'er lowered her head slightly. Everyone in the family, including grandfather, has never left the family. We have never disobeyed the orders of the previous emperor. Shangguan family. This family was once famous in the God Kingdom. Unfortunately, the Shangguan family head, Shangguan Tian, made a huge mistake and was killed by the previous Divine Lord. Not only that, but the entire Shangguan family was imprisoned by the previous Divine Lord, and they weren't allowed to step out of the Shangguan estate. The once most prominent family was far away from the center of power in the God Kingdom overnight. This was a huge blow to the Shangguan family. It could be said that if this went on, in less than 10 years, the Shangguan family would completely decline and become a third-rate power. At this moment, Seven suddenly said, from now on, the Shangguan family's ban is lifted. Your Shangguan family can fight for everything that once belonged to the Shangguan family. Shangguan Xian'er was slightly stunned when she heard this. In the next moment, she hurriedly knelt down and said with a trembling voice, thank you, Your Majesty. Seven's words had undoubtedly given the Shangguan family a new lease on life, because in the God Kingdom, the Shangguan family was gradually declining, and they didn't dare to develop, as they were afraid of drawing the displeasure of the Divine Lord. Now that Seven had lifted the ban on the Shangguan family, it was really a new lease on life for the Shangguan family. Seven looked at Shangguan Xian'er. You may leave. Shangguan Xian'er stood up and bowed respectfully before leaving. Seven looked at the Tendo. Tell me your conditions. The Tendo was silent for a long time, and then he said, only one. I am still the Tendo, and I won't submit to your God Kingdom. I am equal to you, and we are in a cooperative relationship. 7 was silent. Tendo continued. I can give up Tendo's essence, but I'll be in charge of all spirit beasts in the chaos verse. I won't participate in the internal affairs of your divine kingdom, nor will I interfere with the struggles between humans and other races. If you agree, I'm willing to fight alongside you and defend the chaos verse against the invasion of Xianhuang world. 7 thought for a long while and then nodded. Okay. Tendo nodded. All right. With that, she got up and left. After the Tendo left, 7 walked out of the hall, and very quickly she disappeared. Soon she arrived at the top of a mountain range. Tianji sect. This celestial arcanum sect could be said to be a very special sect in the divine kingdom. This was because this sect had too much information. There was almost nothing they didn't know. Xiaoqi came to a large hall, and an old man walked out. Tianji sect's current sect head Mu Yun knew about it. 7 looked at Mu Yunji. Send orders to the Dao Execution Army to return immediately. The Dao Punishment Army. Hearing this, Mu Yunji's expression changed. Your Majesty. Actually, the strongest army in the Divine Kingdom wasn't Lord Shen Wu and the Dark Guards, but the Dao Punishment Army. When Wu Anning killed Tendo, he established an army, which was the Dao Punishment Army. It was meant to kill Tendo. Moreover, this army had vanished without a trace after Wu Anning had annihilated the Heavens Dao. Many people said that Wu Anning disbanded the Dao Punishment Army, but he didn't. These people existed in another way. The Dao Punishment Army. They were loyal to the Divine Kingdom monarch and only listened to his orders. Only the Divine Kingdom monarch could make these people return. 7 said softly. No matter how far, you have to return immediately. Mu Yunji bowed slightly and left. A moment later, 7 disappeared. Great Void Sword Sect in front of the hall. Jian Taishu stood quietly. He had waited for 18 days. At this moment, his body was becoming more and more illusory, and he would vanish completely in at most a day. Time passed bit by bit. On the second day, Jian Taishu's body was becoming more and more illusory. Right when he was about to vanish completely, the door to the hall suddenly opened, and Yi Xian walked out. He was slightly stunned when he saw Yi Xian, and then a smile appeared on his face. Congratulations. As soon as he finished speaking, he vanished completely, and only a black sword-shaped seal remained. Yi Xian opened his palm, and the black sword seal appeared in his hand. What's this? The Demon Lord said. The Great Void Sword Seal, a treasure at the peak of the Dao realm. If swordsmen were to use it, then it would be able to display might that surpasses the Dao realm. Yi Xian sized up the sword seal in his hand carefully. At this moment, the sword seal suddenly transformed into a ray of light that entered the space between his brows. Bang! A powerful strand of sword intent suddenly surged out from within his body. It wasn't his sword intent. Yi Xian was shocked in his heart. Senior, does this sword seal contain someone else's sword intent? The Demon Lord said. Yes, you can utilize this sword intent at the critical moment, and it can increase your combat strength by at least 40%. This is much more powerful than your dragon soul. Yi Xian smiled. Good stuff. As he spoke, he put the Great Void Sword Seal away, and then he turned around and bowed slightly to the hall. Seniors, thank you. Sword God. Almost 20 days of comprehension had allowed him to enter the divine realm from the saint realm. Moreover, he could be said to have experienced too much during these 20 days. Every sword intent represented a supreme sword Dao, and these different sword Daos allowed him to understand that even though sword Daos led to the same goal by different means, there were still differences. On the path of sword Dao, even though the end was the same, there were thousands of paths that led to the end. Even though he had chosen one path, if he could see the path that others had chosen, then he would definitely gain a lot. To put it simply, it was learning from others' strengths to make up for their weaknesses. And this time his harvest was very, very big. Yi Xian opened his palm, and the Executing Heaven sword appeared in his palm. A moment later, the Executing Heaven sword transformed into a ray of light that shot into the sky. A sword hum shook the sky. The Executing Heaven sword circled ceaselessly above Yi Xian's head, and rays of light appeared incessantly above Yi Xian's head. Sword God. I'm my own god. Yi Xian gazed at the executing heaven sword in the sky. With his current strength, it shouldn't be difficult for him to kill an Emperor Realm expert. As if he'd thought of something, he suddenly opened his palm, and a dark sword box appeared in front of him. There were a total of 9 Dao Realm swords within the box. These 9 swords belonged to the 9 seniors of the Great Void Sword sect in the hall. This sword box was also a treasure of the Great Void Sword sect. The Great Void Sword box contained a sword formation within it, the ultimate sword formation. Yi Xian fell silent for a moment, and then he activated the sword formation. In an instant, 9 rays of light shot into the sky from the swordsman. Hiss! Hiss! In an instant, the entire sky was sliced into countless pieces. Within the sword formation, everything was destroyed. Yi Xian said softly, "This sword formation is amazing." The demon lord said, "Let's go." Yi Xian put away the sword formation. And then he said, "Senior, are there any other powers in this universe? Especially powerful ones?" The demon lord said, "What do you want to do?" Yi Xian said seriously, "I think many powers must have been destroyed before they could pass on their legacy. I feel that I have a responsibility to help them, so that their legacy can be passed on. I will not shirk from this." The demon lord fell silent for a moment, and then he said, "You really are extraordinarily strong, Yi Xian." At this moment the demon lord said, "There is a place. However, the members of the demon race don't really like that place. If you go there and there are still people alive, you might be in danger. Do you want to go? Of course, they might have no choice but to pass on their legacy to you. After all, there might not be any more living people coming to that place." Yi Xian thought for a moment, and then he said, "Let's go and give it a try." The demon lord said, "Head north." Yi Xian nodded, and then he flew up on his sword. Now his speed was at least 5 times faster than before. It could be said that his current strength was much stronger than before. Most importantly, his physical body was that of a Thear-cranked body. His current physical body was even stronger than a dragon's. In a short while, Yi Xian arrived at a mountain range. At this moment the demon lord said, "We're here." Yi Xian stopped and looked around. He was surrounded by mountains, and he was as small as a grain of sand. Yi Xian asked, "Senior, what is this place?" The demon lord said, "The Immortal Dao sect." Yi Xian asked, "Is it very powerful?" The demon lord said, "Before I appeared on this continent, they were the strongest in this world. Their status was equivalent to the god nation in the chaotic universe." Yi Xian nodded slightly. "Senior, have you been to the Black-Yellow Great World?" The demon lord said, "I wanted to go there, but I didn't because of some things. This place is not simple. Many experts from other worlds want to go there after leaving their worlds." Yi Xian asked, "Why?" The demon lord said, "People strive for greater heights." Hearing this, Yi Xian understood. The Black-Yellow Great World was the strongest world in the 4-dimensional universe. The martial arts civilization there was definitely far superior to other worlds. If he wanted to improve, going there was definitely the best choice. The demon lord said, "Let's go to the main peak and try our luck." Yi Xian nodded and flew up on his sword. In a short while he passed several mountains and arrived at the main peak of the Immortal Dao sect. There was a large hall on the main peak. However, it was covered in weeds. At a glance, it was very desolate. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian sighed with emotion. He could imagine how prosperous this place was in the past. But now, Yi Xian shook his head and withdrew his thoughts. He glanced around, and it was extremely quiet. There was no sign of life at all. The demon lord said, "Looks like you came here for nothing." Yi Xian thought for a moment, and then he suddenly said loudly, "Did anyone from the Immortal Dao sect leave behind a soul or a clone? If you don't come out, I'll leave. Once I leave, you'll suffer a great loss." The Demon Lord. Chapter 643. After Yi Xian spoke, there was still no movement around. Yi Xian's face sank. "I'm really leaving." There was still no response. Yi Xian sighed and turned to leave. At this moment, footsteps suddenly sounded from behind him. Yi Xian stopped and turned around. In front of him stood a woman in a white dress. The woman looked to be in her 20s. She wore white and was very beautiful. Yi Xian bowed slightly. Greetings, senior. The woman looked at Yi Xian. You're from the demon sect. Demon sect. Yi Xian's heart skipped a beat. She could tell that he was a demon at a glance. The woman looked at Yi Xian. Your body has been modified by the ancient demon blood, but you're also a swordsman. Are you from the Great Void Sword sect or the demon sect? Yi Xian said in a deep voice, both. Both. The woman sized up Yi Xian. It seems that both the demon sect and the Great Void Sword sect have chosen you. Yi Xian nodded. The woman said indifferently, why did you come to my immortal Dao sect? Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, then said softly, I'm just here to take a look. The woman looked at Yi Xian, see? Yi Xian nodded. The woman said, then let's go. Yi Xian did not leave. The woman asked why. Yi Xian said seriously, Senior, Junior came this time not only to take a look, but also to ask, do you need a successor? Saying so, he pointed at himself. If you do, I think I'm pretty good. You can consider it. Demon Lord. The woman looked at Yi Xian. After a while she said, you're not modest at all. We do need a successor, but we won't look for you. Yi Xian asked, why? The woman said, you are the successor of the demon sect. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, are the people of the demon sect bad people? The woman looked at Yi Xian. My immortal Dao sect will not give our inheritance to someone from the devil sect. Yi Xian was silent. The woman said, leave. Even if my immortal Dao sect's inheritance is destroyed, I won't give it to someone from the devil sect. With that she turned to leave. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly said, Senior, let me recommend someone to you. The woman looked at Yi Xian. Don't tell me that you're the one I recommended. Yi Xian replied, how is that possible? My skin is not that thick. The woman said indifferently, no, you're not that thick. Yi Xian was speechless. The woman asked, who do you recommend? At this time, Yi Xian suddenly returned to the World Prism Pagoda, the 5th floor. At this moment, Yi Ling was cultivating on the 5th floor. Yi Xian walked in front of Yi Ling. Yi Ling opened her eyes. Big brother? Yi Xian smiled and said, let's go. With that, he pulled Yi Ling out of the World Prism Pagoda. The moment Yi Ling appeared, the white-clothed woman's gaze fell on her. Looking at Yi Ling, the white-clothed woman was surprised. You, Yi Xian quickly said, Senior, my little sister is not bad, right? The white-clothed woman ignored Yi Xian and stared at Yi Ling. After a while, she walked in front of Yi Ling and said softly, are you willing to inherit my immortal Dao sect's inheritance? Yi Ling blinked, and then looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian quickly nodded. Yi Ling nodded. I'm willing. The white-clothed woman smiled slightly. Good. Come with me. With that she pulled Yi Ling away. Yi Xian hurried to follow him. The white-clothed woman brought Yi Ling to a large hall. Yi Ling stood in front of the door. The woman was also in front of the door. Inside the hall, Yi Ling was sitting cross-legged on the ground. There was a ball of white light above her head. The white-clothed woman suddenly asked, she's your little sister? Yi Xian nodded. The white-clothed woman said calmly, why are you here? Yi Xian said, we're here to look for opportunities. The white-clothed woman looked at Yi Xian. You're not from this cosmos. Where are you from? Yi Xian said, the chaotic cosmos, a very distant place. The white-clothed woman frowned slightly. The periphery of this cosmos has been destroyed by the powerhouses of the mysterious origin world. Ordinary people can't enter. Yi Xian said with a smile, someone sent me here. The white-clothed woman still wanted to ask something. Yi Xian suddenly smiled and said, Senior, we're just here to look for opportunities. We won't do anything bad. The white-clothed woman looked at Yi Xian. After she leaves, can she establish an immortal Dao sect in your world? Yi Xian fell silent. Establishing a sect. This wasn't a simple matter. The white-clothed woman said, can't I? Yi Xian said, you can. However, I can't guarantee what this immortal Dao sect will become in the future. The white-clothed woman said, she obtained the inheritance of my immortal Dao sect. Her future achievements won't be bad. Yi Xian nodded. He looked at the distant hall. He would always protect Yi Ling. However, he understood that Yi Ling had to be strong enough herself. Yi Ling had obtained the inheritance of the immortal Dao sect, and had Aiwa's guidance. Her future achievements would definitely not be bad. Time passed by quickly. In the blink of an eye, 3 days had passed. At dusk, Yi Ling walked out from the hall. As soon as Yi Ling walked out, she ran over to Yi Xian and handed over 2 spatial rings with excitement. Big brother, so many Dao realm treasures. So many. The white-clothed woman was speechless. Yi Xian glanced at the white-clothed woman, and then he spoke seriously. Right, they're all yours. Big brother won't have a single one. The white-clothed woman's expression softened slightly. She walked over to Yi Ling and spoke softly. From now on, you're the sect master of the immortal Dao sect. I hope that no matter what happens in the future, the immortal Dao sect's martial Dao civilization will continue. Is that all right? Yi Ling looked at the white-clothed woman and nodded. I'll establish an immortal Dao sect in the future and pass down its inheritance. The white-clothed woman smiled. All right. Also, you must be careful of the Xuanhuan Great World. Back then, one of our disciples joined the Xuanhuan Great World. If they find out that treasure is with you, they'll definitely pay any price to find you. So you must be careful, understand? Yi Ling looked at Yi Xian. I'm not afraid. My big brother will protect me. Yi Xian nodded. With me here, no one can harm my little sister. Yi Ling smiled sweetly. The white-clothed woman looked at Yi Xian. He was a super genius of our immortal Dao sect back then. He became an emperor before the age of 18. Now he's probably even more unfathomable. Yi Xian said indifferently. Emperor? When I was 18, I killed no less than 10 emperor realm experts. Yi Ling was speechless. The white-clothed woman looked at Yi Xian. After a while, she shook her head and looked at Yi Ling. Take care. Perhaps we'll meet again one day. Yi Xian hurriedly asked, Senior, you're still alive? The white-clothed woman glanced at Yi Xian. Glancing at Yi Xian, he said, I don't want to talk to you. With that, her body gradually turned illusory. Yi Xian was speechless. Yi Ling bowed deeply to the white-clothed woman. The latter said softly, Don't let anyone see that treasure. Understand? With that, she deliberately looked at Yi Xian. Then her body completely turned illusory and disappeared. After the white-clothed woman left, Yi Ling suddenly looked at Yi Xian. She opened her right hand, and a palm-sized jade door appeared in her palm. Yi Xian was a little puzzled. This is... At this moment, the demon lord suddenly said, The immortal Dao mystic door. Our world has 2 super divine treasures. Kid, this door is not simple. Yi Xian hurriedly asked, How is it not simple? The demon lord said, This immortal Dao mystic door is the trump card of the immortal Dao sect. Not only does it contain the powerful martial inheritance of the immortal Dao sect, but it also has a super great formation. Once this formation is activated, it can easily destroy this world. This is not the main point. The main point is that there is something that many cultivators dream of. The immortal spirit Holy Spring. This thing can reconstruct one's spirit root and fundamentally change one's physique. This thing is very heaven-defying, especially for cultivators above the Emperor realm, because after reaching the Emperor realm, it is too difficult to go further. And this immortal spirit Holy Spring can help people break through the shackles of the Emperor realm. At this point, he paused for a moment before continuing. This profound gate of the immortal Dao is also a defensive treasure. In any case, it's a very powerful treasure. It can be said that the essence of the entire immortal Dao is in this gate. Yi Xian asked, Is it better than my world prison pagoda? After a moment of silence, the demon lord suddenly said, Will you die if you don't fight? Bang! Yi Xian was sent flying. Yi Ling was stunned. Then she hurriedly flew to Yi Xian and helped Yi Xian up. Brother, are you okay? Yi Xian smiled. I'm fine. Yi Ling nodded slightly. Brother, do you want it? As she spoke, she handed the door to Yi Xian. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. This is a gift from the immortal Dao sect. Remember, this is their kindness. We brother and sister will always remember this kindness. When we go back, brother will think of a way to help you build an immortal Dao sect and make you the sect master. Sect master. Hearing this, Yi Ling's eyes lit up. Then brother, what will you do? Yi Xian said. I will be the sect master's brother. Haha. Yiling also covered her mouth and laughed. Soon, Yi Xian left with Yiling. Back to the chaotic universe. This time, it could be said to be full of gains. Yi Xian brought Yiling along as he moved swiftly through the spatial tunnel. Yi Xian said softly, I wonder if Miss Ayu has found Yinjia. Dao Law. This Dao Law was also the core of the prison pagoda. Moreover, he really wanted to open the 7th level. The 7th level contained an unparalleled martial technique. If he learned the immeasurable sword, then with his current strength, would anyone in this starry sky be able to take a strike from him? In the chaotic universe, in a certain starry sky, a tombstone floated silently. The tombstone had split open from the middle, and there was a spatial tunnel within it. The tunnel was so deep that the end couldn't be seen. During this period, the Divine Kingdom had sent experts to destroy this tombstone, but all of them had failed. Even the executing heaven sword couldn't damage this tombstone, let alone other treasures. Therefore, the Divine Kingdom had given up on destroying this tombstone. Right at this moment, a man suddenly walked out from the tombstone. Chapter 644. Behind the middle-aged man were 2 mysterious men in dark golden robes. There were only 3 of them. The middle-aged man glanced around and said softly, The spiritual energy in this chaotic universe is really abundant. He smiled. It's a good place. It can make up for the missing spiritual energy in the North universe. Behind the middle-aged man, one of the mysterious men said, Envoy, according to the information, this universe is not simple. The middle-aged man smiled. How is it not simple? The mysterious man said, There seems to be an unknown expert here. Unknown expert. The middle-aged man narrowed his eyes, and his expression gradually turned solemn. The so-called unknown expert was so powerful that it was unknown. In the Black Origin Great World, the number of experts who had reached the unknown realm could be counted on one hand. After a moment of silence, the middle-aged man said in a deep voice, Do you know who it is? The mysterious man shook his head. I only know it's a swordsman, and there seems to be more than one of them. The middle-aged man frowned. Why would such an expert come to a world like this? The mysterious man shook his head. I don't know. Anyway, it's better to be careful. The middle-aged man nodded. Of course. I came here for that treasure, and to see how the spiritual energy in this world is. The corners of his mouth curled up. The spiritual energy in this universe is excellent. The mysterious man reminded. That treasure. The middle-aged man nodded and said, Let's go to Shinwu City and take a look. With that, he disappeared on the spot. Soon, the middle-aged man and the other 2 appeared in the sky above Shinwu City. The middle-aged man looked down at the city, and a powerful pressure enveloped the entire city. Everyone in the city was shocked. The middle-aged man looked down. Is Yi Xian here? At this moment, a woman appeared in front of the middle-aged man. It was Enlancio. Enlancio looked at the middle-aged man and was about to speak when a man appeared beside her. It was Yi Xian. Enlancio was slightly stunned when she saw Yi Xian. Then she said softly, You're back? Yi Xian nodded. Let me handle it. He looked at the middle-aged man. From the Black Origin Great World? The middle-aged man smiled. Yes. Have you heard of us? Yi Xian nodded. I have. It is said that your world is a very, very powerful world. As he spoke, he flipped his right hand, and a sword of the Dao realm appeared in his hand. Expert from the Black-Yellow Great World, do you dare to stand and receive my sword? If you can take it, I'll give you that treasure with both hands. The middle-aged man glanced at the sword in Yi Xian's hand, and said with a smile, What's the harm in taking a strike from you? Yi Xian said in a deep voice, I'm not joking, you might die with this strike of my sword. The middle-aged man laughed. You? And the sword in your hand? Come, let alone one sword strike, even if it's 10, what's the harm? Behind the middle-aged man, a mysterious person suddenly said, Don't be careless. The middle-aged man smiled. Don't worry, it's just a small swordsman from a small world. Besides, a Dao realm sword can't hurt me. As he spoke, he looked at Yi Xian. Come on. Yi Xian nodded, then leaped in front of the middle-aged man, and slashed down with his sword. The middle-aged man raised his right arm to block. This time, he did not use his full strength. only less than 50% of his strength. Just as Yi Xian's sword was about 10 inches away from the middle-aged man's head, the sword in his hand suddenly changed into the executing heaven sword. Almost at the same time, the middle-aged man's expression changed, but it was too late. The sword slashed down. Boom! The middle-aged man's body instantly disintegrated, leaving only his soul. However, his soul was directly locked in place by a mysterious force. The middle-aged man was stunned. Then his face instantly turned ferocious. "You cheated," Yi Xian said seriously. "What cheated? Don't talk nonsense." The middle-aged man stared at Yi Xian. "What sword is that?" Yi Xian smiled. "Heaven's execution." The middle-aged man took a deep breath. "What a good heaven's execution. But do you think you've won like this? Let me tell you, even if only your soul is left, you're still an ant in front of me." As soon as he finished speaking, his soul suddenly trembled violently, and a powerful force vibrated from his soul. At this moment, Yi Xian raised his hand and slashed one sword to fix the soul. In an instant, the middle-aged man's body became illusory. At this moment, the middle-aged man was stunned. That sword had destroyed his soul so easily. How was that possible? Yi Xian looked at the middle-aged man who was becoming more and more illusory. "I told you, if this sword of mine goes down, you might die." Just as the middle-aged man was about to say something, Yi Xian waved his right hand, and the soul-suppressing sword directly absorbed his soul. Yi Xian looked at the remaining two mysterious men. One of them was about to make a move, but was stopped by the other. His physical body has been named Emperor, and his sword Dao has become divine. We can't match him. Yi Xian was about to make a move when the two suddenly disappeared. They were extremely fast, and in the blink of an eye, they disappeared into the end of the vast starry sky. However, Yi Xian did not let them go. He stomped his right foot, and his whole body turned into a sword light that shot into the sky. Soon, Yi Xian chased the two into the endless starry sky, and the two directly entered the tombstone. Just as Yi Xian was about to rush in, the voice from the 6th floor suddenly sounded. "Did you get carried away?" Yi Xian hurriedly stopped and looked at the tombstone. Fortunately, he did not rush in. If he had rushed in and directly rushed to the black-yellow great world, he would really be sending himself to death. Yes, as if thinking of something, Yi Xian said, "Senior, with your strength, can you shatter that black-yellow great world with a slap?" The demon lord was silent for a moment, and then said, "Do you think I can?" Yi Xian smiled sheepishly. "Not really, haha." Bang! Yi Xian suddenly flew out, and this time, he flew nearly 1,000 feet away. At this moment, the 6th floor suddenly said, "You have to suppress your demonic nature. This demonic nature will make you even more shameless, and it will make you even more annoying. So I hit you for your own good, understand?" Yi Xian. At this moment, a woman appeared in front of Yi Xian. "Tendo." Yi Xian looked at the Tendo. He did not say anything, but the executing heaven sword had already appeared in his hand. He did not forget that this Tendo had been plotting against him. The Tendo looked at Yi Xian. "You have become stronger." Yi Xian said, "Can't I?" The Tendo looked at Yi Xian, but did not say anything. Yi Xian turned and left. At this moment, the Tendo appeared in front of Yi Xian again. She looked at Yi Xian. "You should leave the chaotic universe and go to another universe." Yi Xian asked, "Why?" The Tendo looked straight at Yi Xian. "Because you have that supreme treasure on you. If you do not leave, the people from the black-yellow great world will definitely come here. And if you leave, they will turn their attention away from the chaotic universe." Yi Xian was silent. The Tendo said in a low voice, "Yi Xian, if you stay here, you will harm everyone in the chaotic universe." Yi Xian looked at the Tendo. "You mean I should go out and attract their attention, right?" The Tendo was silent. Yi Xian smiled and said, "Why don't you go and attract their attention?" The Tendo said, "I don't have that treasure." Yi Xian said, "So what if I have a treasure? If I have a treasure, I should go and die. You say that I will harm the entire chaotic universe? Fine." As he spoke, he pointed with a finger. The prison pagoda appeared in front of the Tendo. Yi Xian said, "This is for you. Go and attract their attention." The Tendo looked at Yi Xian. She did not take the prison pagoda. Now, Whoever took this treasure would become the target of the black-yellow great world. Seeing that the Tendo did not move, Yi Xian sneered. Tendo, are you so afraid of the people from the black-yellow great world? Aren't they people too? If they are people, then I am not afraid. Let me tell you, one day, I will fight my way to the black-yellow great world. I will let them understand that I, Yi Xian, am not someone to be bullied. At this moment, a voice suddenly came from the tombstone. Then why don't you come now? We will wait for you here. Yi Xian. Chapter 645. Yi Xian gazed at the tombstone. The spatial passageway was trembling, and it seemed like someone was coming over. The yellow world. Yi Xian fell silent for a moment, and then he said, Senior, can you destroy this tombstone? The demon lord said, It's pointless. They'll still find another way to get here if I destroy it. Yi Xian spoke solemnly. I need some time. He wasn't confident in his ability to deal with the people from Yellow World right now. The demon lord fell silent for a moment. I do need some time. Time. Yi Xian fell silent. What he needed now was time. Even though his physical body was at the Emperor realm, and he'd attained the Sword God realm, the experts from Yellow World were definitely not ordinary experts. He wasn't confident in his ability to deal with experts of that level. Right at this moment, Yi Xian seemed to have thought of something, and the corners of his mouth suddenly curled up slightly. The demon lord said, What bad idea have you come up with this time? Yi Xian chuckled. Senior, you'll know soon enough. As he spoke, he gazed at the tombstone. The frequency at which the teleportation passageway trembled was increasing, and it was obvious that the experts on the other side were getting closer and closer. Tendo had an extremely solemn expression on her face as she gazed at Yi Xian. Aren't you going to run? Yi Xian spoke indifferently. I don't want to talk to you. Tendo was speechless. Around 15 minutes later, a powerful aura suddenly swept out from the tombstone. Obviously, they were about to arrive. Tendo took a deep and long glance at Yi Xian. She was about to leave. She didn't want to go head-on against them. However, she still wanted to see how Yi Xian would deal with it. Right at this moment, the tombstone suddenly trembled violently, and then a black shadow appeared in the depths of the teleportation passageway. It's coming out. Tendo's eyes narrowed slightly, and she was ready to flee at any moment, because the aura of this person had surpassed the Emperor realm. Obviously, the people from the black-yellow great world didn't want to give Yi Xian any chance. And just as that person was about to come out, an illusory Xiaota suddenly appeared between Yi Xian's eyebrows. In the next moment, Yi Xian laughed sinisterly. Restrain. Withdraw. The prison pagoda appeared above the tombstone, and in the next moment, a blood-red light enveloped the tombstone. Then, the prison pagoda trembled violently, and the tombstone was sucked into the pagoda. On the side, Tendo was stunned. Could it be done like this? When the prison pagoda absorbed the tombstone, a black-robed man walked out from the tombstone. Of course, he was currently in the World Prison Pagoda. First level of the Prison Pagoda. The man in black looked around and frowned. Did I come to the wrong place? No. The black-clothed man narrowed his eyes and scanned the surroundings with a hint of vigilance. At this time, Yi Xian appeared in front of the black-clothed man. The black-clothed man looked at Yi Xian. You are Yi Xian? Yi Xian nodded. The black-clothed man scanned the surroundings. This is the treasure? Yi Xian nodded. Yes. The black-clothed man laughed. You have kept me here. Obviously, you want to use this treasure to deal with me, right? Yi Xian answered, yes. The black-clothed man looked at Yi Xian. You are inviting a wolf into your house. At this point, he suddenly looked up. There is someone else. Yi Xian nodded. A very, very powerful senior. The black-clothed man laughed. Very powerful? Yi Xian nodded. Very, very powerful. Do you want to go and have a chat with him? The black-clothed man laughed. Do you know how powerful I am? Yi Xian shook his head. The black-clothed man said, the top-notch formidable martial artists of your world should be at the Varch realm. He should be a Varch, right? Yi Xian nodded. Yes. The black-clothed man smiled. Even 10 Thearchs can't do anything to me. Yi Xian said in a low voice. You think so highly of me. I am only 18 years old. The black-clothed man looked at Yi Xian and laughed. From your bone structure, you should be 20 years old. Yi Xian, the black-clothed man continued. We have investigated you. Your talent is not bad. You have a lot of potential. Because of this, we will not underestimate you. Since we want to kill you, we naturally have to send someone who is very confident. We do not want to send someone weaker for you to practice on. Yi Xian said in a low voice. Do you want to go to the 6th floor to take a seat? The black-clothed man looked up and laughed. It seems like the person on the 6th floor is your trump card. Wait a moment. I will go and take his head now. The moment he finished speaking, he disappeared. He went to the 6th floor. Yi Xian looked up at the 6th floor. At this moment, a bloody head suddenly fell in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian was stunned. It was the black-clothed man's head. Yi Xian's face was filled with shock. This, the demon lord suddenly said. He might have underestimated my strength. Yi Xian. The demon lord's strength. Yi Xian actually did not know how strong the demon lord was. But he was sure that he was very, very strong. Yi Xian collected his thoughts and asked, Senior, what cultivation realm are you at? The demon lord said, Cultivation realm has no meaning to us. Yi Xian hesitated and said, Senior, with your strength, you should be able to come out, right? The demon lord said, Yes. Yi Xian was about to speak when Xiao Ling's voice suddenly sounded from the 1st floor. Then why don't you leave? I have no place to plant spirit fruits. It's really annoying. Yi Xian. The demon lord smiled and said, Little girl, you can also come here and plant them. Xiao Linger said excitedly, Really? The demon lord said, Really? Xiao Linger flew directly to the 6th floor. At this moment, Yi Xian said, Senior, can you give my sister some pointers? Yi Ling. Whether it was him or Yi Ling, they both needed someone to give them pointers. Especially Yi Ling. She had obtained the immortal Dao sex inheritance. But if there was no one to guide her, it would be very difficult for her to absorb it on her own. The demon lord said, Yes. Hearing this, Yi Xian was delighted. Thank you, Senior. The demon lord suddenly said, This girl's talent is excellent. However, she has been protected by you so well that she has a serious dependence on you. This is not a good thing. You need to be careful. Yi Xian nodded. I understand. If there was a chance, he must let Yi Ling go alone to gain experience. A moment later, Yi Xian began to clean up the spoils of war. The black-clothed man had 3 storage rings. One of them had over 100 million divine gems. Over 100 million divine gems. Seeing so many divine gems, Yi Xian's entire body felt unwell. Was he this rich? But this was normal. An expert of this level must have a terrifying amount of wealth. With these 100 million divine gems, it could be said that only some of the super forces in God Nation could compare to his current wealth. As for the 2nd storage ring, there were some natural treasures. There were all sorts of supreme-grade treasures, spirit fruits, immortal herbs, and some extremely precious spirit pills. There were many types of spirit pills, some for healing, some for recovering mystic chi, and some for cleansing the marrow. Moreover, every single one of them was supreme grade. The value of these spirit pills was definitely more than the 100 million divine gems. Crystal. Yi Xian laughed excitedly in the Prism Pagoda. What a windfall! What a windfall! Yi Xian gave all the treasures such as spirit fruits and spirit herbs to Xiao Linger, which made Xiao Linger ecstatic. Seed. Xiao Linger immediately began to work. Looking at the busy Xiao Linger, Yi Xian laughed heartily. Not long after, these spirit fruits and spirit herbs would definitely be plentiful. He never doubted Xiao Linger's ability in growing spirit fruits. Yi Xian withdrew his thoughts and looked at the 3rd storage ring. There were fewer things in the 3rd storage ring, only a little more than 30, but all of them were treasures of the Dao realm. Moreover, there was a spear among them. This spear was a treasure of the God realm. Among all of his treasures, this spear was second only to his heavenly punishment. As for the heavenly punishment, it could not be measured by its grade for now. Apart from this spear, there were 31 treasures of the Dao realm. 31. 9 of them were swords. Yi Xian wasn't excited when he saw this, and he fell silent instead. He was rich. The wealth of this black-clothed man had completely exceeded his expectations. After a long time, Yi Xian shook his head and sighed. Being poor has limited my imagination. Yi Xian put all the treasures away. He would be able to do many things with this wealth. Strengthen Martial God City. Regardless of whether it was Wu Yuan or the Sword Sect, he sincerely hoped that they could grow stronger and stronger. Moreover, he was the city governor of Martial God City, so he had the responsibility to make these two powers better and stronger. Moreover, with these treasures, Martial God City could definitely undergo a transformation. Meanwhile, the Demon Lord suddenly said, I can faintly sense that the 8th level is about to awaken. The 8th level? Yi Xian was stunned, and then he said, The 8th level? The Demon Lord said, Yes, I have a feeling that it might be about to awaken. When this pagoda was sealed all those years ago, the stronger the person was, the stronger the seal would be. Now because you've been using this pagoda frequently, those seals are loosening. So the 8th level should be about to awaken as well. Yi Xian spoke solemnly. Senior, do you know what the 8th level is? The Demon Lord said, I can't spy on it. Yi Xian fell silent for a long time, and then he said, Do you think the 8th level will do something to me? The Demon Lord said, Who knows? However, I think it might. Yi Xian was slightly puzzled. Why? The Demon Lord said, Because you really need a beating most of the time. Yi Xian was speechless. A short while later, Yi Xian left the pagoda of prison. He didn't care about the 8th or 9th level now. He had a greater enemy, and it was the black-yellow Great World. After Yi Xian came out, the Tendo still hadn't left. She looked at Yi Xian. Where is he? Yi Xian said indifferently. I dealt with him with a single sword strike. The Tendo looked straight at Yi Xian. Do you think I'm stupid? Yi Xian said indifferently. His corpse is in the pagoda. Why don't you come with me to take a look? The Tendo's eyes narrowed slightly, but she didn't speak. How would she dare to go in? Would she be able to come out once she went in? Yi Xian didn't pay attention to the Tendo. He waved his right hand, and the tombstone appeared in front of him again. The Tendo said in a low voice, What are you doing? Yi Xian looked at the Tendo, and the latter said coldly, Since you can take it away, why did you release it? Don't you know that people from the black-yellow Great World can teleport here? Yi Xian said angrily. So what if they teleport here? Can't they come over? What right do you have to stop them from coming over? It's their freedom to come over. Freedom, do you understand? Chapter 646. The Tendo gazed at Yi Xian. Is there something wrong with you? Yi Xian paid no attention to the Tendo, and he just turned around and walked away. The Tendo's expression was extremely unsightly. After a long time, the Tendo took a deep glance at the direction Yi Xian had left towards. Even now, she didn't know what had happened to those fellows from Black-Yellow Great World. But she had no doubt that they wouldn't end up well. Because Yi Xian was still alive. She was even more fearful of Yi Xian. When Yi Xian was shameless, he was harmless, and no one could sense how dangerous he was. But if he was serious, he was definitely a very cruel and merciless person. Danger. At this moment, she was gradually beginning to feel that Yi Xian was a dangerous figure. After a long moment of silence, the Tendo turned around and left. After Yi Xian returned to Divine Martial City, he immediately went to look for Enlancio, and then he opened his palm to reveal a spear. A spear at the God Realm. Enlancio was slightly stunned. This is? Yi Xian smiled. I just obtained it. It's more suitable for you, so I'll give it to you. Enlancio glanced at the spear. It's too precious. Yi Xian was slightly displeased. What precious? In my heart, nothing can compare to you and Ling-er. Enlancio gazed at Yi Xian, but she didn't say anything, and just put the spear away. Yi Xian grinned, and then he turned around and left. Meanwhile, Enlancio suddenly said, I went to the Divine Kingdom to challenge an Emperor Realm expert. Yi Xian hurriedly asked, How was it? Enlancio gazed at Yi Xian. I won. Yi Xian was stunned, and then he said, You're that strong. Enlancio nodded, and then she glanced at the spear in her hand. With this, I should be able to kill an Emperor Realm expert with ease. As she spoke, she gazed at Yi Xian. Call me the next time you fight. With that she turned around and left. In the same place, Yi Xian remained silent for a long time before leaving. He had found Emocia. The current Emocia had also reached the Tendo realm, only one realm lower than the Star Lord and the others. It had to be said that Emocia was also very strong. Emocia glanced at Yi Xian. "You're back." Yi Xian smiled, and then waved his right hand. More than 20 Tao realm-level treasures appeared in front of Emocia. Yi Xian smiled and said, "Pick a suitable one." Emocia looked at Yi Xian in astonishment. Yi Xian smiled and said, "What are you waiting for? Pick one that suits you." Emocia fell silent for a long time, and then he chose a claw-type Dao realm treasure. Yi Xian put away the rest of the treasures and turned to leave. Emocia looked at the departing figure, and did not speak for a long time. Before long, Yi Xian found Emo Yunqi and the others. Yi Xian placed those Dao realm treasures in front of them. "Pick one." Emo Yunqi glanced at Yi Xian. "Bandit Yi, did you rob someone?" Yi Xian's face darkened. "Am I that kind of person?" Emo Yunqi said seriously, "Yes, how could you be that kind of person? Rob. That's not your style. You must have stolen it." Yi Xian. At this moment, Bai Zhe suddenly said, "You talk too much nonsense." As he spoke, he directly chose a defensive treasure. A defensive treasure. He mainly cultivated the physical body, so defensive treasures were very useful to him. At this moment, Jiang Jiu suddenly said, "God Nation sent someone over." Yi Xian looked at Jiang Jiu, and Jiang Jiu said solemnly, "They want some of their merchant associations to enter our divine martial city. What do you think?" Yi Xian said, "Is Baiji's merchant association the only one in our divine martial city?" Jiang Jiu nodded. "Only her." Yi Xian said, "Then don't let anyone else in." Jiang Jiu looked at Yi Xian, and Yi Xian smiled. "Baiji has helped us a lot." Jiang Jiu nodded. "Understood." Yi Xian said with a smile, "Everyone should choose a treasure that suits them." Soon, Jiang Jiu and the others chose their own treasures. Yi Xian chatted with them for a while, and then left. Cultivation. In the following time, Yi Xian began to cultivate like crazy. It was worth mentioning that while Yi Xian was cultivating, Tang Clan suddenly announced their allegiance to God Nation. Tang Clan's allegiance. One had to say that this news caused quite a commotion in the entire chaotic universe. One had to know that Tang Clan was once one of the overlords of this place. Now they were submitting to God Nation. Along with Tang Clan's announcement, the monster race also announced their allegiance. Out of the few powers, only Order Alliance didn't say anything. 3 days later, a little girl suddenly came to Divine Martial City. 7. Not far behind 7, there were 10 black-shirt men with blades by their waists. 7 walked into Divine Martial City, and the 10 of them wanted to follow. 7 shook her head. "Wait outside." The 10 of them bowed and left. After 7 entered Divine Martial City, she headed straight to the Sword Sect. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly appeared in front of her. 7 sized up Yi Xian. "Sword God." Yi Xian nodded. "I broke through not long ago." 7 nodded her head. "Congratulations." Yi Xian smiled. "Why are you free to come here today?" 7 said. "What do you think about Xianhuang Great World?" Yi Xian said solemnly, "I know a little about this place." 7 nodded. "What do you think?" Yi Xian said with a smile. "I will definitely fight with them. You know that I have no choice." Unless he gave up that treasure, otherwise, the experts of Xianhuang Great World wouldn't let him off. 7 said, "I have sent a batch of people from God Nation to rush back." Yi Xian looked at 7. "They are only targeting me." 7 shook her head. "They aren't just targeting you. Their target is the entire chaotic universe." Yi Xian kept silent. 7 said, "My men will pay attention to them. No matter how many or who they are, as long as they dare to step into my territory, I will make sure they won't be able to leave." As she spoke, she looked at Yi Xian. "There is a team of secret guards in the God Nation. They are all assassins, and there are only 23 of them. They all have the ability to kill emperors. I will leave them to you." Yi Xian was stunned and then asked, "Hand them to me?" 7 nodded. "You are also an assassin. Especially that chaotic energy of yours. You can use it to hide them. With your help, even Emperor Realm experts won't be able to sense them." Kill Emperor Realm experts. Yi Xian said solemnly. 7. This Xianhuang Great World might be stronger than we think. 7 nodded. I know. After saying that, she asked, so what? Yi Xian smiled. Right, anyways we will just fight them. 7 nodded. At most in 10 days they will reach our world. You have to be prepared. After saying that, she got up and left. On the spot, Yi Xian was silent. 10 days. In 10 days, the people from Xianhuang Great World would arrive. Yi Xian said softly. I wonder if Yu has found Yinjia. After saying that, he turned around and left. Cultivate. There wasn't much time left. He needed to cultivate Burial Fist to the extreme. This Burial Fist was one of his trump cards now. Yi Ling, on the other hand, had advanced by leaps and bounds under the guidance of the elder from the 6th floor. This was because Yi Ling had already grasped the inheritance of the immortal Dao sect, and with the guidance of the 6th floor, her progress could only be described as terrifying. He would often exchange blows with Yi Ling. However, she was afraid of hurting him, and didn't use her full strength at all. It was useless no matter how many times he said it. Yi Xian was helpless. Every time he sparred with her, it was like playing house. The 6th floor was helpless too. Yi Ling was good at everything, but she lacked ferocity. In a fight between experts, there were many times when that kind of ruthlessness was required. 6 days later, Yi Xian, who was cultivating, suddenly left the prison pagoda. In the next moment, he transformed into a ray of light and shot into the sky. He saw 3 people in the sky, 3 familiar people, a Yu Yinjia, and Yu Qi who he hadn't seen for a long time. Yu Qi smiled when he saw Yi Xian. Long time no see. Yi Xian smiled. Master Yu Qi, it's great to see you. He really respected Yu Qi, because Yu Qi had taken care of him a lot in the Pale Sword sect. As if he'd thought of something, Yi Xian looked at Yinjia. The latter sized up Yi Xian and nodded. You're stronger than before. Yi Xian smiled. Miss Yinjia, long time no see. Yinjia nodded, and was about to speak when the prison pagoda suddenly appeared before her. It trembled slightly, as if it was trying to say something. Yinjia smiled. This pagoda's temper is much better than before. A Yu's face was expressionless. This stupid pagoda is getting more and more shameless, after being with someone for so long. Yi Xian was speechless. Yinjia glanced at Yi Xian and smiled. Let's not talk about that for now. Let's go open the 7th level. Yi Xian was delighted and hurriedly said, You found the Dao laws of the 7th level? Yinjia nodded. Yes. However, she's unwilling to return. Yi Xian asked, Why? Yinjia said, She has her own life now, and she doesn't want to return to this stupid pagoda. However, as the Dao laws of the 7th level, she has a way to remove the seal on the 7th level. So let's head there. Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, All right. As he spoke, they entered the prison pagoda. The prison pagoda suddenly appeared before Yinjia, and it trembled violently, as if it was trying to say something. A Yu suddenly said, If she doesn't return, then she won't return. Understand? The prison pagoda shook its head forcefully. A Yu raised his hand and slapped it. Bang! The prison pagoda was blasted flying. A Yu said, Come, let's head to the 7th level. As soon as he finished speaking, they arrived at the entrance to the 7th level. Yinjia opened his palm, and a black seal suddenly flew out. It didn't take long for the black seal to fly into the 7th level, and a short moment later, the door to the 7th level suddenly opened. Xiaoling, charged in, and then everyone watched as she hugged the box on the 7th level. There was a skewer of candied fruits on the box. Xiaoling, grinned as she gazed at the box in her hand, and then she turned around and ran. Now she had 2 boxes. No one knew exactly what was within those boxes. Yi Xian walked over to the ancient book, and he just picked it up when it transformed into a ray of white light that entered the center of his forehead. The boundless sword. It didn't take long for countless pieces of information to surge into Yi Xian's mind. Meanwhile, the demon lord's voice resounded. This sword technique. It disregards realms. From this moment onward, besides experts at my level, there's no one you can't kill. P.S. Ask for tickets. Chapter 647. The Immeasurable Sword. What was the immeasurable sword? Using the sword as a thought, using the thought as a sword. Wherever the thought is, the sword is. With a single thought, I can launch a sneak attack and backstab an enemy within a 300 m radius. I can disregard any defense, any armor, any laws, any secret techniques, any divine abilities, any Tao laws, any restrictions of the world in any realm. After killing the enemy, you can immediately enter a state of emptiness. You won't be restricted by the world, and you won't be able to detect any laws, secret techniques, or Tao laws. You can't touch any cause or effect. Needless to say, according to this description, the immeasurable sword was truly terrifying. Most importantly, he could enter a state of emptiness after killing the enemy. What did that mean? It meant that he could escape after killing the enemy. Yi Xian sat down cross-legged and started to cultivate the immeasurable sword. If he succeeded in cultivating this sword technique, it would be his strongest trump card apart from the Prism Pagoda. Yinjia and the others left silently. On the 5th floor, there were only 2 of them, Yinjia and Ayu. Yinjia spoke softly. Any news about Big Sister? Ayu shook her head. Yinjia spoke softly. What do you plan to do in the future? Ayu spoke indifferently. I don't want to stay here. I'll ask him to remove the restrictions on me once he's strong enough. Yinjia said. I'm afraid the pagoda won't agree. Ayu fell silent. Tao laws. There were a total of 10 Tao laws in the pagoda, and they represented the supreme laws of the world. The reason the Prism Pagoda was so powerful was because of those 10 Tao laws. Meanwhile, Yinjia spoke abruptly. The pagoda has changed quite a bit. Ayu shook her head. Its intelligence hasn't fully recovered yet. If it fully recovers. At this point, she didn't continue speaking. The Prism Pagoda. No one knew how terrifying this damn pagoda was. As if she'd thought of something, Ayu added. Actually, it reaped what it sowed. In the past, it thought that it could sweep through everything after coming out. But it was almost destroyed by those 3 people. If that woman hadn't shown mercy, it would probably never have woken up again. Yinjia nodded. Back then, when the World Prism Pagoda fought against those 3 people, the World Prism Pagoda had already lost. Although it wasn't completely erased, it still paid an extremely painful price. Ayu said softly, he's not bad. If he takes full control of the pagoda, we'll be able to regain our freedom. Yinjia said solemnly, I'm afraid it'll be very difficult. Ayu smiled and said, it's not difficult. Yinjia looked at Ayu. Ayu smiled and said, do you know why this broken pagoda recognized him as its master? Yinjia said, this has always been something I've been curious about. Ayu said indifferently, this fellow has learned to be smart now. If someone used it against him, then he wouldn't be able to resist it at all. Time trickled by just like that. 3 days later, Yi Xian, who was on the 7th floor, opened his eyes. In his eyes, 2 rays of sword light were flashing like lightning. Meanwhile, Ayu and Yinjia appeared in front of Yi Xian. Ayu sized up Yi Xian. Did you succeed? Yi Xian shook his head. Just a little bit more. Ayu asked, a little bit? Yi Xian nodded. I'll go somewhere else. As soon as he finished speaking, he left the pagoda. It didn't take long for Yi Xian to arrive at the top of the mountain behind the sword sect. Yi Xian just stood there and looked down. The boundless sword. Actually, he'd succeeded in cultivating the boundless sword. However, it was still lacking a trace of charm. Boundless contained many things, such as kindness, sorrow, joy, resentment, hatred, killing, benevolence. It contained countless things. Yi Xian silently stood at the top of the mountain, looking down as he recalled the scenes in Qing City. Difficult. How difficult was it at that time? Because at that time, he and his little sister were still young, and it was extremely difficult to survive in a family like the Yi family, which was full of deceit. Especially at the beginning, he and his little sister almost starved to death several times. Since leaving Qing City until now, it had not been easy. Most of the time, he had a feeling that life was really bitter. There were also times when it was sweet, but most of the time it was bitter. Living was not easy. After a long time, Yi Xian suddenly shook his head with a smile. Relieved. Now that he thought back to his time in Qing City, It was indeed very difficult. However, compared to what he was facing now, that difficulty was insignificant. He even somewhat missed the days in Qing City. At that time, he only needed to fight against the Yi family. But now, there were simply too many people to fight. However, in his opinion, the difficulties he encountered now would be the same as the difficulties he encountered in Qing City one day in the future. There was no obstacle that could not be overcome. Yi Xian turned and left. Divine Kingdom. In a large hall, Xiaoqi sat quietly, and in front of her was Shangguan Xianer. Shangguan Xianer said, "Your Majesty, our people are ready." Xiaoqi nodded. "Did we miss anything?" Shangguan Xianer shook her head. "No. I just don't know how many people from the black-yellow great world will come." Xiaoqi said softly, "We must win the first battle." Shangguan Xianer nodded. "If we win the first battle, our morale will definitely rise. However, this victory will definitely attract the attention of the black-yellow great world." Xiaoqi nodded slightly. "I understand." Shangguan Xian bowed slightly and turned to leave. When she walked out of the hall, Shangguan Xianer suddenly stopped. Not far in front of her, a man walked towards her. The person who came was Yi Xian. Seeing Yi Xian, Shangguan Xian smiled slightly. "Greetings, Lord Yi." Yi Xian was slightly stunned, then said, "You are?" Shangguan Xianer smiled. "I am His Majesty's advisor, Shangguan Xianer." Yi Xian asked, "What about Miss Nangong?" Shangguan Xianer hesitated, then said, "She went back to the Eastern Wasteland world." Yi Xianer said, "You replaced her?" Shangguan Xianer nodded. "Yes. I am afraid I will have to keep in contact with Lord Yi in the future. There may be many places where I will disturb you." Yi Xian smiled. "Miss Shangguan is too polite." Shangguan Xianer smiled slightly. "Lord Yi, go and see His Majesty. Xianer will leave first." With that she turned and left. Yi Xian entered the hall. And there was only Xiaoqi in the entire hall. Xiaoqi sized up Yi Xian. "You seem a little different." Yi Xian looked at Xiaoqi. "Have you reached the transcendent sword god realm?" Xiaoqi nodded. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. Xiaoqi really wasn't a normal monster. Xiaoqi said, "They should be here soon." Yi Xian was about to speak. But at that moment, the two of them turned their heads and looked outside the hall. Xiaoqi said softly, "So fast." Yi Xian said, "Let me go meet them first." The moment he said that, he had already disappeared. Within the hall, Xiaoqi kept silent for a long while and then said, "It has begun." In the darkness of the hall, a voice rang out. "Understood." Yi Xian once again came to the starry sky. In front of the tombstone, Yi Xian stood quietly. Not far in front of him was the heavenly Tao. Tendo looked at Yi Xian and didn't say a word. Yi Xian didn't care about Tendo and just looked at the tombstone. Very quickly, 6 people appeared in the tunnel. 6 experts who surpassed Emperor Realm. When he saw this, Yi Xian didn't say a word and just took out the prism pagoda. In the next moment, Yi Xian kept the tombstone into the prism pagoda. Yi Xian immediately laughed complacently. Then he put away the prism pagoda, turned around and disappeared. Not far away, Tendo kept silent for a long while and then said, "What a cunning person." Chapter 648. So sinister. Tendo knew that those people from the Xuanhuan Great World were most likely finished. Inside the prism pagoda, there were 6 more people on the first floor, led by a black-robed old man. There was a dark mark between the black-robed old man's eyebrows. When he appeared in the pagoda, the black-robed old man frowned. "Be careful." At this time, Yi Xian appeared in front of the black-robed old man. Seeing Yi Xian, the black-robed old man narrowed his eyes. "You are that Yi Xian?" Yi Xian nodded. "That's me." The black-robed old man looked at Yi Xian. "You brought us here." Yi Xian nodded. The black-robed old man pondered for a moment. After a moment he said, "This is the 5th-dimensional treasure?" Yi Xian smiled. "Yes." The black-robed old man said softly. "You brought us here because you are confident in dealing with us, right?" Yi Xian smiled. "I have a few questions. I wonder if you can answer them." The black-robed old man nodded. "Speak." Yi Xian said. "How did you people from the Xuanhuan Great World know that I have that treasure?" the black-robed old man said. Someone calculated it, but, saying this, he looked at Yi Xian. You are a little special. The person who calculated it suffered a severe backlash. Of course, you are not an ordinary person to possess this treasure and have it recognize you as its master. But no matter who you are, even if you are the reincarnation of some almighty being, it will not change our attitude. Yi Xian asked why. The black-robed old man said, in this fourth dimension we fear no one. Fear no one. Yi Xian was silent. Confidence. He could see that the people from the Xuanhuan Great World were very confident. At this time, the black-robed old man suddenly said, is there anything else? Yi Xian nodded. One last question. If you die here, what kind of expert will the Black-Yellow Great World send? The black-robed elder looked at Yi Xian. Someone more powerful than us. Yi Xian nodded slightly. Understood. As he spoke, he pointed upwards. There's a senior on the 6th floor who wants to invite you for tea. The black-robed old man nodded. I also want to see what kind of experts this world has. With that, the 6 of them disappeared. Yi Xian stood there quietly. At this time, Xiaolinger appeared in front of Yi Xian. She blinked and said, there will be something good, right? Yi Xian was speechless. At this moment, a low voice suddenly sounded out from within the tower. How is this possible? As the voice faded, 6 corpses suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. 6 completely undamaged corpses. Yi Xian took their storage rings and glanced at them. Gradually, the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. Rich. Truly rich. There were more than 200 million divinity crystals in their storage rings. Among them, there weren't many Dao realm treasures. There were only 6. As for the elixirs, there were more than 50 bottles. He didn't recognize these elixirs, but he knew that they were extremely precious. As for the rest of the miscellaneous items, he calculated that he now had 320 million divinity crystals, 34 Dao realm treasures, more than 70 bottles of elixirs, and some miscellaneous items. Sudden wealth. It was worth mentioning that Xiaolinger had taken away all the treasures of these experts. This made the little girl extremely happy. Of course, Yi Xian was happy as well. He'd struck it rich. At this moment, the Fiend Lord's voice suddenly sounded. These 6 corpses can be refined into demonic corpses. Demonic corpses? Yi Xian was stunned, and then he said, what are demonic corpses? The Fiend Lord said, they're equivalent to puppets. My devil race has a cultivation technique that can refine living beings into demonic corpses. However, it's rather cruel. Do you want it? Yi Xian hurriedly said, of course, cruel or not. These people were here to take his life. He naturally wouldn't be merciful or benevolent to his enemies. The Fiend Lord nodded slightly. You don't have to cultivate. I'll refine them for you. Yi Xian was delighted when he heard this. Thank you, Senior. He seemed to have thought of something and asked, Senior, what are their realms of cultivation? The Fiend Lord replied, the realm above the Emperor realm. Yi Xian spoke solemnly. What's the realm above the Emperor realm? The Fiend Lord replied, those below the unknown realm are ants. I should say those below the Dao Breaker realm. Do you understand what I mean? Yi Xian fell silent. He naturally understood what the Fiend Lord meant. Below the Dao Breaker realm. Yi Xian laughed bitterly. Senior, I'm afraid I still have a long way to go. The Fiend Lord replied, there is indeed a long way to go, but cherish it. The higher you cultivate, the more lost you will often be. Yi Xian asked, why? The Fiend Lord replied, you don't understand, Yi Xian. A moment later, Yi Xian left the prison pagoda and handed the 6 corpses to the Fiend Lord. A demon corpse. A demon corpse that surpassed the Emperor realm. He had to say that this was another super trump card, because in the entire chaotic universe, the highest realm was the Emperor realm. Actually, it was a pity that the Fiend Lord still didn't come out. He knew that the other could already come out. But the other didn't come out. Either there was a reason, or there was a plan. However, he couldn't care so much right now. His priority now was to improve his strength and deal with the threat from the Black-Yellow Great Realm. After leaving the prison pagoda, Yi Xian saw Tendo. She hadn't left yet. Tendo looked at Yi Xian. Are they all dead? Yi Xian said indifferently. Does it have anything to do with you? After saying that, he turned and left. He didn't have a good impression of this Tendo. At this moment, Tendo appeared in front of Yi Xian. She looked at Yi Xian and said, Yi Xian, I have to say that I underestimated you. Yi Xian said, What do you want? Tendo said in a low voice, The source in your body is special. It's not suitable for her to follow you. If she follows me, Yi Xian suddenly said, Do you believe that I won't hack you to death? Tendo looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian was expressionless. Don't have any ideas about Xiaolinger, otherwise I'll cut off your head. After saying that, he turned and left. The heavens Dao remained silent. In the past, she wouldn't have been able to bear it. But now, Yi Xian was becoming more and more dangerous. It wasn't just the World Prism Pagoda. There was also Yi Xian. Yi Xian himself was becoming more and more dangerous. After a long time, Tendo turned and left. This time, Yi Xian didn't release the tombstone, because it couldn't be done more than 3 times. The people from Heaven Origin World weren't stupid. If he continued doing this, it would definitely backfire. Moreover, he didn't want the people from Heaven Origin World to come immediately. However, things didn't go as he wished. He hadn't left for long when the space behind him suddenly trembled violently. Yi Xian turned around. At this moment, the space 3,000 feet in front of him suddenly collapsed. Then, a space crack 3,000 feet long appeared in front of him. At this moment, a figure silently appeared from within the spatial rift. At the same time, a powerful aura suddenly spread out. Rumble. In an instant, the entire starry sky trembled violently. Meanwhile, a white-clothed man appeared in front of Yi Xian and Tendo. The white-clothed man's gaze descended onto Yi Xian. How did they die? Yi Xian pondered deeply for a moment, and then he said, They died of stupidity. Tendo was speechless. P.S. 10 minutes late. It can't be helped. I just got home. I almost ran away. Chapter 649. The man in white looked at Yi Xian. Suddenly, he waved his right hand, and a powerful force erupted from his hand like a volcano. Rumble. In an instant, the surrounding space shook violently. Beside him, Tendo retreated rapidly. He did not take the attack head-on. Not far away, Yi Xian's expression suddenly turned sinister. In the next moment he punched forward. Burial fist. Boom. With Yi Xian as the center, the space within a radius of tens of thousands of feet instantly collapsed when the punch was thrown. Seeing this, the heavenly divinity, who was several thousand zhang away, became extremely solemn. When did Yi Xian become so powerful? In the distance, as Yi Xian punched out, the white-clothed man in front of him instantly retreated rapidly. This retreat was no less than 10,000 feet. At this moment, the white-clothed man's eyes were filled with astonishment and seriousness. He looked at Yi Xian and said, Your fist technique is so powerful. Yi Xian was expressionless. He clenched his right hand slowly, and a powerful force condensed again. The man in white slowly opened his right hand. In the next moment, the space around Yi Xian trembled violently. At this moment, Yi Xian stomped his right foot lightly. Boom! The surrounding space returned to normal. The man in white frowned slightly. You! Before he could finish speaking, Yi Xian had already rushed in front of him. Then, a huge fist with a sound of air exploding fiercely slammed toward his face. The man in white did not dodge. Instead, he raised his hand and punched toward Yi Xian's fist. Rumble! 2 powerful forces suddenly exploded. The surrounding space trembled violently. Yi Xian had already retreated to his original position. But in the next moment, he rushed toward the man in white again. Fight! Ever since he had improved, he had never fought with anyone. Therefore, he did not have a clear idea of his combat strength. Now he needed to fight. But this time he did not use his sword. Instead, he used his fist. Right now, his physical body had been sealed as an emperor. In addition to the burial fist, his physical strength alone was enough to suppress the white-robed man. In the starry sky, a series of explosions rang out continuously. Not far away, Tendo became more and more shocked as she watched, because she knew that Yi Xian was a swordsman. But at this moment, this Yi Xian actually relied on his own physical body, and that unknown fist technique to forcibly suppress the man in white. After all, the man in white was a sole emperor. At this moment, not too far away, boom, an explosion suddenly resounded like a clap of thunder, and then Yi Xian returned to his original position. Not far away, a spear appeared in the hands of the white-clothed man. The white-clothed man looked coldly at Yi Xian. We underestimated you. You. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly disappeared. Boom. The space around the white-clothed man and Yi Xian collapsed in an instant. Xiaoqi turned around and looked at Yi Xian. Xianhuang Great World is too far from us, and they won't easily send an army over. So they will definitely send stronger experts. They have lost so many people before, and will definitely remember that. So, the people who come this time won't be ordinary. Yi Xian said solemnly. How many people are you prepared to bring? Xiaoqi looked at Yi Xian. Just you and me. Yi Xian was stunned. Shangguan Xianer was stunned too. 2 people. Xiaoqi looked at Yi Xian. This time we don't need more people, we just need quality. If they don't attack, then they will be wiped out. Yi Xian was silent. Xiaoqi asked, Is there a problem? Yi Xian said, I want to bring someone. Xiaoqi asked, Who? Yi Xian smiled. I am from Xinwu City. Xiaoqi said, That girl called in Lanxiao? Yi Xian nodded his head. Xiaoqi thought about it and said, No. Yi Xian didn't understand. Why? Xiaoqi said, She is strong enough, but I want. After saying that, she looked towards Yi Xian. Insta-kill. Insta-kill. Yi Xian understood what Xiaoqi meant. Xiaoqi wanted someone from Xianhuang Great World to be able to insta-kill them. Yi Xian said solemnly, If they are above Emperor Realm, I won't be able to insta-kill them. Xiaoqi looked at Yi Xian. You can. You can. This time we can't hold back at all. As she spoke, she turned around and walked back to her original position before she said, The Profoundness world has committed many evil deeds, so they definitely have many enemies. This time, if we annihilate them with an absolute advantage, then those who have enmity with them will take the initiative to come to us. Aura. Aura. Yi Xian thought about it and then nodded his head. Okay. He didn't want to sit still and wait for death. He had to strike first. 7 nodded. Let's go. Yi Xian was shocked. Now. 7 looked at Yi Xian. Their people are definitely on the way, so naturally we have to go now. Yi Xian nodded his head. Okay. Let's do it. At that moment, Shangguan Xianer suddenly said, Your Majesty, do you want them to go with you? 7 shook her head. Let them stay here. Shangguan Xian walked in front of 7 and bowed. Your Majesty, forgive me for saying too much, but your safety concerns the entire God country. If anything happens to you, the entire chaotic universe will instantly fall apart. 7 shook her head. I will be fine. Shangguan Xianer looked at 7 and she said softly, If we can't beat them, we can run. Yi Xian. Shangguan Xianer. A moment later, Yi Xian and 7 left the Order City. In the Order City, Shangguan Xianer looked up at the sky, her eyes filled with worry. 7 was too confident. Of course, she had the strength to be confident. However, many people would fail because of their own confidence. At that moment a voice came from the side. Don't worry. Shangguan Xian turned her head and saw that it was Yen Dao. Yen Dao said softly, If she wants to retreat, besides the legendary unknown realm expert, no one can kill her. Shangguan Xianer suddenly asked, Your Majesty, why are you bringing City Lord Yi? In terms of strength, although City Lord Yi is strong, he shouldn't be the best candidate. Yen Dao was silent for a moment and then said, He is the best candidate. Shangguan Xianer didn't understand and asked why. Yen Dao said, Your Majesty's personality is too cold, and he is too shameless. The 2 of them can make up for each other. Shangguan Xianer. In the depths of the distant starry sky, Yi Xian and 7 arrived in front of the spatial crack again. In the depths of the spatial crack was a spatial passageway that led to the black-yellow great world. 7 looked at Yi Xian and Yi Xian smiled and said, Let's go. With that, the 2 of them entered the spatial passageway. As soon as the 2 of them disappeared, Tendo appeared where the two of them had been. Watching the two of them disappear, Tendo didn't speak for a long time. At that moment, a voice sounded in Tendo's ear. If they don't return, this chaotic universe will return to your hands. Tendo slowly closed his eyes. If they don't return, there will be no more chaotic universe. The voice was silent. Tendo looked at the spatial crack and said softly, they should be able to return alive, right? In the spatial passageway, Yi Xian and Seven stood side by side. Seven was a head lower than Yi Xian, and they both held a sword in their hands. Because of the Tao of space, the spatial passageway around the two of them was very stable. Yi Xian suddenly said, Seven, if we don't return. Seven looked into the distance and said softly, then we won't return. Chapter 650. Within the space tunnel, Yi Xian and Seven rode on the sword. On the sword, Seven's eyes were closed like she was resting. Half a day had passed since the two of them left the chaotic universe. During this time, they didn't see a single person from Xianhuang Great World. Yi Xian raised his head and looked towards the end of the tunnel. He knew that the expert who came this time would definitely be stronger than those who came before. Just at that moment, Seven suddenly said, don't worry. Yi Xian looked at Seven and smiled. I am not worried. I just don't know when I will be able to end the cause and effect on me. Cause and effect. In the past he didn't believe in such things, but now he did. The world prison tower and his own identity. These were all mysteries until now. At this moment Seven suddenly said, your sword is rejecting me. Yi Xian looked at the executing heaven sword in his hand. It is rejecting you? Seven nodded. Yi Xian didn't understand. Why? Seven shook her head. I don't know. Yi Xian looked at executing heaven sword, but it didn't reply. At that moment Seven said, my sword and your sword should know each other. Yi Xian reached out with his right hand, and Seven's sword flew into it. Yi Xian sized up the sword in his hand and said softly, you know executing heaven? The sword shook slightly. Yi Xian looked at executing heaven's sword, and the latter directly returned to the prison tower. Yi Xian. At the side Seven said softly, your sword seems a little dispirited. Yi Xian looked at Seven and she continued, something must have happened to it in the past. Yi Xian nodded, and was about to say something. Just at that moment the tunnel shook. Shortly after, dozens of people appeared in front of Seven and Yi Xian. When he saw them, Yi Xian was stunned. That was because they were all so young. When they saw Yi Xian and Seven, they were stunned too. At that moment the leading teen asked, you all came from the chaotic universe? Yi Xian nodded. The expressions of the young man and the others became a little strange. At that moment a black-robed teen snickered. I heard that the chaotic universe is very rich. Is that true? Yi Xian looked at the black-robed teen. It's so. The black-robed teen laughed. So? How can we do that? We've spent more than a month to get here, and we've paid a huge price. If it's just so, wouldn't we lose everything? Yi Xian was a little frightened as he said, You are here to rob us? The black-robed teen laughed. You all just now? Yi Xian said in a deep voice. How could you do that? Yi Xian said, You all, a chaotic universe. Nearby, the black-robed youth and the others began to laugh loudly. The black-robed youth laughed loudly. Look everyone. The people of the Chaosverse are so naive. Heaven Yi said Yi Yi Yi. Yi Yi. Yi. Yi Xian said seriously. How could I do such a thing? I'm a righteous person. Seven looked at Yi Xian. Haha. Not far away the black-robed teen laughed. A righteous person? What a righteous person. A moment later, he appeared in front of Yi Xian. He sized Yi Xian up. You don't seem to have any treasures. How about this? Follow us to the chaotic universe and show us the way. Tell us where the richest things are. What do you think? Yi Xian hesitated for a moment then said, What's in it for me? The black-robed teen blinked. In it, I'll leave you with a dog. Chi. At that moment, a sword suddenly pierced through the black-robed teen's throat. Not far away, the youth and the others were stunned. The person who had attacked was Yi Xian. Yi Xian gazed at the black-clothed teen. The wind was quite strong just now, so I didn't hear you clearly. Can you repeat that? The black-clothed teen gazed at Yi Xian with terror. At this moment, even his soul couldn't escape. Right at this moment, the young man in luxurious robes suddenly said, "Who exactly are all of you?" Yi Xian gazed at the youth and was about to speak when Seven suddenly vanished. At the instant that Seven vanished, the expressions of the youth and the others changed drastically. They were just about to attack when a wave of light enveloped them. A few breaths of time later, Seven returned to where he stood just now, and there was a pile of corpses not too far away from him. Wait, there's one more person alive, and it's the man who led the group. At this moment, the man's countenance was pale as a sheet, and his body was trembling. Meanwhile, Seven suddenly said, "Is there anyone else besides all of you?" The man gazed at Seven. "Who exactly are you?" Seven's face was expressionless. "You didn't answer the question." As soon as he finished speaking, a ray of light flashed. Hiss! The youth's head flew into the air. Blood sprayed out like a fountain. Yi Xian was speechless. Seven said, "Let's go." Yi Xian suddenly said, "Wait a moment." As he spoke, he put away the spatial rings of everyone here. There was a total of over 60 million divine crystals in their spatial rings. But there were comparatively fewer Dao Realm treasures, only 3. Looks like Dao Realm treasures aren't common in Skyearth world. As if he'd thought of something, Yi Xian gazed at Seven. "Do you want it?" Seven shook her head. "I don't lack money." As she spoke, she gazed at Yi Xian. "Do you lack it a lot?" Yi Xian nodded. He wanted to devour the sword and develop divine martial city, so he didn't lack money at all. Seven spoke softly. "It's useless to me." Yi Xian was puzzled. "Why?" Seven replied, "Because I have everything. What I don't have can't be bought with money." Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "Birth is very important." Seven said, "I asked Nangong to call you to my cultivation room. You can take the sword there." Yi Xian smiled. "I think it's better to be independent." Chapter 651. Yi Xian stared at something not too far away, his face expressionless. Very quickly a figure appeared there. Not long after, that figure solidified. It was a woman. She looked to be in her 20s, and wore a long blue dress. Her face was covered by a veil, and the veil seemed a bit special, making it impossible to see what she looked like. When the woman saw Yi Xian, she was slightly startled. She sized up Yi Xian. "Someone from the Chaos Verse?" Yi Xian looked at the woman, not answering. The woman frowned. She was about to speak when she suddenly looked at Xiao Qi, who was in front of Yi Xian. When she saw Xiao Qi cultivating, a look of surprise appeared in her eyes. What a powerful aura! As she spoke, she looked at Yi Xian. "You're cultivators from the Chaos Verse." Yi Xian nodded. "Yes." The woman narrowed her eyes. "You want to go to the Xianhuang Great World?" Yi Xian looked at her. "You want to go to the Chaos Verse?" The woman nodded. "Yes." Yi Xian asked, "Are you going to rob someone?" The woman looked at Yi Xian. "No." Yi Xian was a bit surprised. "Then why are you going to the Chaos Verse?" The woman said calmly, "I'm curious, so I came to play. Can't I?" Yi Xian fell silent for a moment, then smiled. "Of course." The woman sized up Yi Xian and Xiao Qi. "You're going to the Xianhuang Great World?" Yi Xian nodded. "I want to take a look." The woman said calmly, "Go back." Yi Xian didn't understand. "Why?" The woman said, "Because if you go any further you might die." Yi Xian frowned. "Why?" The woman said, "Up ahead is a spatial stronghold of the Xianhuang Great World. It's guarded by a supreme expert." Yi Xian asked, "A spatial stronghold? What does that mean?" The woman looked at Yi Xian. "Is the Chaos Verse so backward?" Yi Xian was speechless. The woman said, "The Black-Yellow Great World has built many spatial strongholds throughout the 4th dimension. With these spatial strongholds, the people of the Black-Yellow Great World can quickly reach many places in the 4th dimension. Not far ahead, there is a spatial stronghold of the Black-Yellow Great World. If you go any further, you will alarm the experts stationed there. If you enter the spatial channel of the Black-Yellow Great World without permission, they will kill you." Yi Xian looked at the woman. Aren't you also in this spatial passageway? The woman said calmly. I paid. Yi Xian was speechless. The woman's gaze suddenly landed on Xiaoqi. She's a swordsman? Yi Xian nodded. The woman spoke in a low voice. She gives me a very dangerous feeling. Yi Xian quickly asked. What about me? The woman looked at Yi Xian. You give me the feeling that you're very dull. Yi Xian was speechless. The woman said, Let's go. With that, she walked in the direction of the chaotic universe. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, The chaotic universe is also dangerous. The woman stopped and looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled. It's true. Yi Xian looked at Seven and Seven said, Bring it back for the engineering sect to study. Yi Xian. At that moment, a black-robed old man suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian and Seven. The black-robed old man looked at Yi Xian and Seven. You came from the chaotic universe? Yi Xian nodded his head. The black-robed old man squinted. Are you here to die? You. At that moment, Yi Xian suddenly disappeared. Wang. A sword hum flashed across the battlefield. In front of Yi Xian, the black-robed old man's expression changed. He didn't expect Yi Xian to attack right away. Caught off guard, he could only use his arms to block. As Yi Xian's sword slashed down, the black-robed old man's arms were instantly shattered. Boom! The moment the black-robed old man's arms were crushed, his entire body was sent flying. At the instant he was sent flying, his physical body exploded. When only his soul was left, Yi Xian attacked once more. One sword to fix the soul. This sword directly fixed the black-robed old man's soul on the spot. The black-robed old man looked at Yi Xian, his eyes filled with terror. You! At this time, Yi Xian waved his right hand, and the soul-suppressing sword directly entered the black-robed old man's soul. In an instant, the black-robed old man's soul was completely absorbed. After absorbing the black-robed old man's soul, Soul's excited voice sounded in Yi Xian's mind. Thank you, young lord. Yi Xian smiled. Why are you so happy? Are you going to break through again? Soul said, If I absorb more experts of this level, I can really break through. Yi Xian smiled. There will be a chance. Soul said, Thank you, young lord. Saying that, she turned into a sword light and returned to Yi Xian's body. At this time, several powerful auras suddenly crushed toward Seven and Yi Xian. Seven looked up in the sky. 3 old men appeared quietly, each of them above the Emperor realm. The leading old man looked coldly at Yi Xian and Seven. From the chaotic universe? Seven suddenly stomped his right foot. Wang. A sword cry resounded through the starry sky. The moment Xiaoqi drew his sword, Yi Xian suddenly leaped up and punched out. Burial fist. With one punch, the space within a radius of several thousand zhang suddenly trembled. One of the old men was instantly blown away by Yi Xian's punch. As soon as the old man stopped, 9 swords suddenly appeared above his head. Seeing the 9 swords, the old man's face changed dramatically. The next moment, countless sword lights instantly engulfed the old man. Absolute kill sword array. Facing experts of this level, Yi Xian directly used his full strength. The sword light directly tore apart the space around the old man. And the old man in the center was directly slashed into countless pieces by the absolute death sword formation. The old man's soul wanted to escape, but Yi Xian's soul-suppressing sword had already appeared. In an instant, the old man's soul was completely absorbed by the soul-suppressing sword. Yi Xian put away the old man's spatial ring, and then he looked to his right. There, Seven was walking slowly towards him, and behind her, the corpses of 2 old men were falling slowly. Yi Xian fell silent when he saw this scene. Fighting above realms. Seven was at the Emperor realm, and she was an extraordinary sword god. It could be said that fighting above realms was as easy as eating and drinking to her. Xiaoqi walked in front of Yi Xian and opened her palm. In her palm there were 2 storage rings. Yi Xian was stunned, and then he asked, For me? Seven nodded. Don't you like it? Yi Xian fell silent for a moment, and then he smiled. Thank you. As soon as he finished speaking, he put the 2 spatial rings away. Seven turned around to look at the enormous disc. I have to take this. Yi Xian spoke in a low voice. It's too big. Seven didn't say anything. She took out a palm-sized bag and tossed it into the air. In the next moment, the enormous disc transformed into a ray of black light that entered Seven's small bag. Yi Xian was speechless. Seven looked at Yi Xian. A heaven and earth bag, the largest storage device in our chaotic universe, and it can store around 100 more. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. If he robbed this Xiaoqi, he would definitely become rich. Because the things that Xiaoqi had on him would definitely be of the highest quality. After putting the disc away, the two of them were about to leave. However, right at this moment, the space behind them suddenly split open. Seven frowned, and she turned around and slashed. Bang! With a loud explosion, Xiaoqi instantly retreated thousands of feet. Chapter 652. Yi Xian turned around. Not far in front of him, there was a shadow standing. The shadow floated in front of him, and he couldn't see the body clearly. The shadow suddenly said, "Primal chaos." Just at that moment, a sword hum rang out from behind Yi Xian. In the next moment, a sword light slashed the shadow. The entire phantom trembled violently, and then it retreated explosively by almost 3 kilometers. At that moment, Seven stood beside Yi Xian. In the distance, the shadow said softly, "What a sharp sword. I never thought that a small chaotic universe would have such a monster like you." As soon as he finished speaking, he took a step forward and instantly appeared in front of Yi Xian and Xiaoqi. At that moment, Seven and Yi Xian drew their swords at the same time. Wung wung. 2 sword hum charged into the sky. Boom. As Yi Xian and Xiaoqi's swords descended, the silhouette instantly retreated over 3 kilometers. At the same time, 2 3-kilometers long spatial rifts appeared in front of Yi Xian and Xiaoqi. They were forcefully slashed open by the sword. At the same time, the shadow became more and more illusory. It was obvious that it wasn't the main body. Yi Xian said, "Let's go." Seven nodded. The two of them turned around and left. When the two of them left, the shadow completely disappeared. But behind Yi Xian and Seven, a teleportation formation suddenly appeared. In the next moment, it started to shake violently. Seeing this, Seven frowned. Someone is forcefully breaking open space. Forcefully breaking open space. Yi Xian looked at the teleportation formation. "We should be there soon." Seven nodded. "Then let's wait." Yi Xian nodded. "Okay." The two of them stood not far from the teleportation formation. Not long later, a black-clothed middle-aged man appeared on the teleportation formation. After the black-clothed man appeared, his gaze shot towards Yi Xian and Xiaoqi like a sharp arrow. Just as he was about to speak, Xiaoqi and Yi Xian suddenly disappeared, and 2 beams of sword light shot towards him. The black-robed man narrowed his eyes and a cold light flickered in them. "How dare you!" As soon as he finished speaking, he took a step forward and punched out. Rumble! A powerful force poured out from his fist like a flood. At this moment, 2 sword lights arrived. Rumble! The space around him cracked, and the black-robed man retreated rapidly, while countless sword lights slashed around him. Within the sword light, a shocked voice suddenly rang out. "You!" Soon the voice stopped abruptly. At that moment, the sword light disappeared. Seven and Yi Xian turned around and left. Behind them, the black-clothed man had already disappeared. On the way, Yi Xian asked, "Are we going back?" Xiaoqi shook his head. "We can't go back. We've already alerted them. If they aren't stupid, they won't let ordinary experts come over." Yi Xian said, "Then shall we continue forward?" Seven nodded. "All right." Soon the two of them disappeared not far away. Continue forward. Yi Xian didn't plan to go back either, because if he went back now, he would just be sitting ducks. Compared to sitting ducks, he preferred to take the initiative to attack. The two of them rode their swords towards the depths of the starry sky. On the way, Yi Xian started to check his trophies. By then, he had 430 million divine crystals, 40 Dao realm treasures, 80 bottles of all kinds of super elixirs, and a lot of miscellaneous items. Dao realm treasures. One had to say that Yi Xian was very excited at this moment. Because he had too much wealth right now. He couldn't not feel smug. It could be said that this wealth could allow him to not worry about swords for a period of time. Apart from that, the demon lord had refined 6 demon corpses for him. The combat strength of these 6 demon corpses far exceeded that of Emperor Realm experts. It should be said that their combat strength far exceeded when they were alive. This was because the demon lord had personally refined them. At the same time, he had also added devil blood into the 6 demon corpses. This devil blood made the bodies of these demon corpses even more powerful. On the whole, he had both money and manpower now. Thinking about something, Yi Xian looked towards 7. 7. The next time we meet others, don't destroy their bodies with one sword, okay? 7 looked towards Yi Xian. Why? Yi Xian grinned. Their bodies are useful to me. 7 nodded. Okay. Yi Xian smiled. 7. Do you really want to unify the 4-dimensional universe? 7 was silent. Yi Xian looked towards 7. 7 said softly. I do want to, but God country's strength doesn't allow it. If I force it, even if I succeed, many people will die. Yi Xian nodded. If a war broke out between the 2 universes, there was no doubt that many people would die. Yi Xian asked. Then, what are your plans? 7 said. Let's deal with Xianhuang Great World first. Deal with Xianhuang Great World. Yi Xian smiled. He had to admit that Xiaoqi had a kind of confidence, a temperament that gave people the feeling that nothing could be difficult for her. At this moment, 7 looked towards Yi Xian. You want to protect God Marshall City, right? Yi Xian nodded his head. 7 nodded her head. Then our goal is the same. Yi Xian said. Will we fail? 7 said. Just do it, don't worry about the outcome. Just do it, don't worry about the outcome. Yi Xian kept silent. Right. As long as they tried their best, who knew what the outcome would be like? Just at that moment, 7 suddenly stopped. She raised her head and looked into the distance. In the starry sky there was an ancient city. The ancient city stood in the starry sky like a crouching beast. City. Yi Xian looked towards the city gate. Above it there were 3 black words, Prairie Flame City. Yi Xian said, let's go take a look? 7 nodded. In just a moment, Yi Xian and 7 came to the city gate. There were no guards there. Yi Xian and 7 walked towards the city gate. Very quickly the 2 of them arrived. The city was really prosperous, and there were many stalls on both sides of the streets. Stalls. Yi Xian was curious. He walked towards a black-robed man on the right. In front of him was a black sword. The sword was totally black, and it looked really special. 7's eyes landed on the sword. Yi Xian looked towards the black-robed man. How much is this sword? The black-robed man said, 30 million god crystals. His voice was a little hoarse. 30 million god crystals. Yi Xian sized up the black sword and shook his head. Too expensive. After saying that, he looked towards 7. Let's go. 7 blinked her eyes. Is it expensive? Yi Xian was speechless. This brat obviously didn't bargain at all. That made sense. She had been noble since young, so why would she bargain? Yi Xian looked towards the black-robed man. Cheaper? This black sword was a Dao Realm sword. What he lacked the most now was a Dao Realm sword. The black-robed man shook his head. This sword was the sword of North Cloud Sword sect leader. Just that alone is already worth 30 million god crystals. North Cloud Sword sect leader? Yi Xian asked. Who? The black-robed man looked towards Yi Xian. You don't know about North Cloud Sword sect? Yi Xian smiled. We came from a small place. The black-robed man didn't explain much. He looked towards Yi Xian. Do you want it? Yi Xian pointed with his finger, and a storage ring landed in front of the black-robed man. There were exactly 30 million god crystals in the storage ring. The black-robed man took the storage ring and turned around to leave. Yi Xian waved his right hand, and the black sword flew into his hand. It was cold to the touch and a little bone-piercing. Yi Xian passed the sword to Xiaoqi. Xiaoqi took the sword and looked at it. At this moment, the black sword suddenly shook violently and turned into a beam of sword light that flew into the distance. Seeing this, Yi Xian and Xiaoqi were both stunned. The sword wanted to escape? At that moment, 7 suddenly shouted, Come back! The moment she said that, the black sword was covered by a streak of sword light. In the next moment, It returned to Seven's hand. Seven looked at the sword in her hand. The black sword shook violently. It still wanted to escape. Seven was expressionless. Someone is summoning it. Yi Xian looked in the direction that the black-robed man left. That person just now. Seven nodded. Yi Xian and Seven suddenly disappeared. In the next moment, the two of them appeared in a corner of the city. In the corner, there was a black-robed man. The black-robed man's right hand was facing up, and he was chanting something. Seeing Yi Xian and Seven suddenly appear, the black-robed man's expression changed. You. Yi Xian looked at the black-robed man. You sold it and then summoned it back. Your plan is really good. The black-robed man didn't say anything. He suddenly stepped forward and two streaks of sword light slashed towards Yi Xian and Seven. Seeing the black-robed man suddenly attack, Yi Xian was slightly stunned. This guy was also a vicious person. The moment the black-robed man attacked, Seven suddenly slashed with her fingers. Chi-chi. The two streaks of sword light instantly collapsed. At the same time, the black-robed man's chest was pierced by a streak of sword light. The black-robed man looked at Seven in disbelief. You. Seven looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian didn't understand. What are you doing? Seven didn't say anything. She hooked her right hand, and the storage ring on the black-robed man's hand flew to Yi Xian. Yi Xian. Seven said, let's go. Yi Xian nodded and left with Seven. He didn't take the black-robed man's corpse because its level was too low, and it didn't have the right to be refined into a demonic corpse. At that moment, the black-robed man opened his palm, and a streak of sword light charged into the sky. Yi Xian said softly, he seems to be calling someone. Seven kept silent for a moment, and then said, he is selling things and we are buying things. Why did he go back on his words? Yi Xian smiled. Because of benefits. Seven looked at Yi Xian. Is money very important? Yi Xian nodded. Very important. Seven said softly. I think that money is the easiest thing to get. Yi Xian was speechless. Those words, Seven looked at Yi Xian. If you don't have it, then go to the God Kingdom treasury to get it. That is the wealth left by the past God Lords. It is our personal wealth, and I have never used it. Yi Xian hesitated. How can I do that? Seven looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian said, since it is your good intentions, then if I don't accept it, then I won't be a good friend. Once we go back, I will find you. 7. P.S. If you want to act cool, you have to save up. If you don't have a script, you won't be able to act cool. Work hard to save up. Chapter 653. Yi Xian and Seven walked around the city, and Yi Xian noticed that there were very few people. Moreover, most of them were here to sell things. There were basically no residents in the city. However, these roadside stalls weren't simple, as they were basically selling Dao Realm treasures. During this period, he even bought 2 Dao Realm swords, which was quite a good harvest. After walking one round, Yi Xian and Seven chose to leave. The moment the two of them walked out of the city gates, they were stopped by 2 old men. The 2 of them held a long sword in their hands. It was a swordsman. One of them stared at Yi Xian and Seven. You killed him. Seven nodded. I killed him. Do you have a problem with that? The old man squinted. Aren't you a little too ruthless? Seven turned and looked at Yi Xian. Didn't he deserve to die? Yi Xian said. He deserved to die. Seven looked at the old man. Do you have a problem? The old man sneered. How arrogant. Then let this old man have a taste of the 2 of your moves. Old man. Just at that moment, Seven suddenly disappeared. Chi. Without any warning, a sword light pierced through the old man's brow. The old man's body froze on the spot. His eyes were wide open and they were filled with disbelief. You, beside him. The other old man wanted to escape, but Seven's sword was faster. Chi. The old man's head was instantly sliced off by the sword light. Seven waved her right hand, and the 2 old men's spatial rings flew into her hand. She then passed them to Yi Xian. Let's go. Yi Xian took the storage ring. He said after a slight hesitation, actually, I'm not a greedy person. Seven nodded. I know you're just poor. Yi Xian. Very quickly, The two of them left Prairie City and continued forward. In the city, Yi Xian and Seven found out that there was another space gathering point in Xianhuang Great World, which was a little far from here. Therefore, the two of them didn't choose to ride on their swords. Instead, they rode on the Imperial Starship. On the Emperor's Starship, Seven looked at the Emperor's Starship beneath her feet and said, "This thing is not bad. After we return, lend it to me. I will let the craftsman sect study it, and they should be able to create many." Yi Xian smiled and said, "All right." Seven looked into the distance and said softly, "The universe is huge." Yi Xian nodded. He had no idea how big the fourth-dimensional universe was. And above the fourth-dimensional universe, there was the unknown fifth-dimensional universe. It had to be said that humans were really tiny in this universe. However, when humans reached a certain level, the universe seemed insignificant in front of them. Not long after, Shaoqi and Yi Xian suddenly stopped. Not far in front of them, there was a mountain that was thousands of feet tall. The mountain was like an inverted sword, floating in the starry sky. In the surroundings of this mountain, there were cranes that flew by, and there were people sitting on the backs of some cranes. Yi Xian said softly, "This should be a sect." Seven nodded. Yi Xian smiled and said, "Let's take a detour." As he said that, he controlled the Emperor's Starship to fly to the right. At this moment, a young man suddenly appeared not far away from Seven and Yi Xian. The young man looked coldly at Yi Xian and Seven. "Don't you know the rules of my Xianyun sect?" Yi Xian asked, "What rules?" The young man said coldly, "Without my Xianyun sect's permission, no outsider is allowed to approach my Xianyun sect's territory." Yi Xian nodded and smiled. "Sorry, we will leave now." However, the young man still blocked in front of them. Yi Xian looked at the young man who was expressionless. "What do you think my Xianyun sect is? That you can come and go as you please?" At this moment, a sword intent suddenly rushed into the sky from within Yi Xian's body. Wang! A sword hum shook the sky. "Sword God!" Seeing this scene, the young man's expression changed and he hurriedly bowed. "So it's a sword god. Sorry for my disrespect." Yi Xian was silent. The young man hurriedly said again, "I was rude just now, please forgive me." Yi Xian said, "Can we leave now?" The young man hurriedly nodded. "Of course." Yi Xian and Seven were about to leave, when an old man suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian and Seven. Seeing the old man, the young man bowed slightly. "Elder Zong." Elder Zong nodded. "You may leave." The young man bowed again and turned to leave. Elder Zong looked at Yi Xian and Seven and smiled. "Both of you are sword gods at such a young age. You are truly geniuses." Yi Xian smiled. "Senior is overpraising us. I would like to ask Senior about something. How can we head to the Black-Yellow Great World spatial stronghold faster?" Elder Zong looked at Yi Xian. "You want to go to the spatial stronghold of the Black-Yellow Great World?" Yi Xian nodded. Elder Zong said solemnly, "That place is not a good place." Yi Xian smiled. "We are just going to take a look." Elder Zong said solemnly, "If both of you ride on the Emperor's Starship, it will take at least half a month to reach there. Moreover, it will not be very peaceful along the way." Yi Xian asked, "Why do you say so?" Elder Zong said, "Because people from the Black-Yellow Great World have been appearing frequently in our cosmos recently. I am afraid they are up to something big." As he spoke, he looked at Yi Xian and Seven. "Both of you, if you want to go to the stronghold of the Black-Yellow Great World, you can use my Immortal Cloud Sect's teleportation array. It is very convenient, and you can reach there in less than half a day." Yi Xian smiled. "Many thanks then." Elder Zong smiled faintly. "Both of you follow me." With that said, he brought Yi Xian and Seven to Immortal Cloud Sect. One had to admit that this Immortal Cloud Sect was indeed very celestial. Clouds and mist lingered around it, and the palace was exquisite and grand, looking like a paradise. In a short while, Yi Xian and Seven came to a training field in Immortal Cloud Sect. Elder Zong looked at Yi Xian and Seven. "Please wait for a moment." With that said, he turned around and left. Seven said, "Something is not right." Yi Xian nodded with a playful smile on his lips. At this moment, the ground beneath Yi Xian and Seven's feet suddenly shook violently. Immediately after, countless lightning bolts suddenly shot up from the ground and trapped Seven and Yi Xian like a cage. Seven was expressionless. Yi Xian looked into the distance. Elder Zong suddenly appeared in behind him. There were 10 people. All of them were Emperor Realm experts. Elder Zong looked at Yi Xian and Seven. Both of you don't seem surprised at all. Yi Xian smiled. If I didn't guess wrongly, you should know who we are. Elder Zong waved his right hand, and a portrait appeared in front of Yi Xian. The person in the portrait was Yi Xian. Elder Zong looked at Yi Xian. I heard that the fifth-dimensional treasure is in your hands. Yi Xian nodded. Indeed. Elder Zong smiled. I really didn't expect that you would actually come to my immortal cloud sect's territory. This is really heaven helping my immortal cloud sect. Yi Xian smiled. How do you know that it isn't heaven that wants to exterminate your immortal cloud sect? With that said, he stomped his right foot. Chi! A streak of sword light pierced through the air. This streak of sword light directly shattered those lightning bolts in front of him, and then headed straight for Elder Zong. Elder Zong squinted his eyes and opened his palm. In his palm, a spear suddenly appeared. At the next moment, he took a step forward, and the spear in his hand shot out like a lightning dragon. Boom! As an explosion resounded, Elder Zong retreated explosively. And at this moment, within the array, Yi Xian punched out. Burial Fist. With a punch, the surrounding lightning bolts instantly turned into ashes. Seeing this scene, the expressions of the Immortal Cloud sect experts changed. Clearly, they had underestimated Yi Xian's strength. Yi Xian slowly walked towards Elder Zong and the others. He didn't say any nonsense, and tapped his right foot lightly. In the surroundings, boundless power of the earth surged towards him like a tide. Elder Zong and the others' expressions became extremely grave. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly charged forward and punched out. Burial Fist. A powerful force surged out from Yi Xian's fist, and Elder Zong's expression changed when he noticed how powerful this force was. Attack together. As soon as he finished speaking, all 11 of them attacked in unison. Rumble. The space in the surroundings cracked apart, and Yi Xian retreated by almost 300 m. Even though his burial fist combined with the energy of the earth was extremely formidable, it wasn't enough to resist 11 emperors at the same time. Elder Zong gazed coldly at Yi Xian. I underestimated you. But so what? Today you. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly disappeared. A sword howl flashed. Elder Zong's expression changed drastically, and he swiftly swept his arms forward. A ray of sword light slashed over. Bang! Everyone watched as Elder Zong's arms were slashed into pieces, and his body was destroyed along with them. Elder Zong gazed at Yi Xian with astonishment. You. Yi Xian smiled. I'm a swordsman. As soon as he finished speaking, the sword in his hand was replaced by the soul-suppressing sword, and then he pointed it at Elder Zong from afar. Bang! Elder Zong's soul was instantly absorbed by Yi Xian. The remaining few Emperor Realm experts from the Immortal Cloud sect had a drastic change in expression as they wanted to retreat. But at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly waved his right hand and 9 swords suddenly appeared above their heads. At the next moment, countless sword lights drowned the 10 of them. Rays of light swept out. Ultimate sword formation. Hiss! 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 The sound of numerous rays of light slicing resounded incessantly, and then 2 emperors were instantly annihilated by the rays of light. Right when Yi Xian was about to continue, a powerful aura suddenly appeared. In the next moment, an old man appeared not too far away from Yi Xian. The old man waved his right hand, and a powerful force blasted the flying swords away. It was the sect master of Immortal Cloud sect. The sect master glanced at the corpses of the 2 emperors, and then he looked at Yi Xian. This matter is over. All of you can leave. Over. Yi Xian grinned. His smile was a little creepy. You can fight whenever you want and stop whenever you don't want. Who do you think I am? This matter isn't over if you don't compensate me with 1 billion divine crystals. As soon as he finished speaking, a powerful sword intent swept out from his body. Chapter 654. 1 billion divine crystals. The sect master of the Immortal Cloud sect looked coldly at Yi Xian. Letting you leave doesn't mean that my Immortal Cloud sect is afraid of you. Understand? Yi Xian looked at the sect master of the Immortal Cloud sect. Are you going to give it to me or not? The sect master of the Immortal Cloud sect had an emotionless expression. No. What can you do? Yi Xian grinned. He was just about to attack when Xiaoqi suddenly vanished. OM. A sword howl resounded abruptly. The sect master of the Immortal Cloud sect's expression changed when he saw Xiaoqi suddenly attack. He charged forward swiftly, and a powerful force swept out. Meanwhile, Xiaoqi's sword arrived. Bang! The sect master of the Immortal Cloud sect instantly retreated by 3 kilometers. At the same time, one of his arms had vanished. Everyone in the surroundings was completely stunned when they witnessed this scene. The sect master of the Immortal Cloud sect had disbelief on his face as well. You? Extraordinary sword god. Xiaoqi looked at the sect master of the Immortal Cloud sect. 2 billion divine crystals. Not a single one less. 2 billion. Yi Xian was speechless. The sect master of the Immortal Cloud sect's expression was extremely unsightly as he stared fixedly at Xiaoqi. You're asking for too much. 2 billion? Even the entire Immortal Cloud sect didn't have that many divine crystals. As soon as the sect master of the Immortal Cloud sect finished speaking, Xiaoqi suddenly vanished once more. Hiss! A strand of sword light flashed. The sect master of the Immortal Cloud sect's expression changed drastically. He didn't dare to receive that attack at all. However, it was too swift, and he couldn't dodge it at all. He had no choice but to receive it. And this time, another arm was gone. Xiaoqi looked at the sect master of the Immortal Cloud sect. 3 billion divine crystals. Not a single one less. The sect master of the Immortal Cloud sect spoke ferociously. You're going too far. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and looked to the right. Ancestor summon. Ancestor summon. As soon as he finished speaking, a white light shot into the sky from the back of the Immortal Cloud sect's hall. A figure silently condensed within the white light. In next to no time, a white-haired old man appeared within the white light. The white-haired elder scanned the surroundings, and his gaze finally fell on Yi Xian and Xiaoqi, who were not far away. Looking at Seven and Yi Xian, the white-haired old man frowned. He was about to say something when Seven suddenly said, For billion god crystals, not a single one less. Yi Xian was speechless. Not far away, the faces of the Immortal Cloud sect's sect master, and the others were livid. In the air, the white-haired old man looked at Seven. After a long while he said softly, Genius! As soon as he finished speaking, he took a step forward, and a strong pressure pressed down on Xiaoqi. Xiaoqi was expressionless. She opened her palm, and the sword at her waist suddenly landed in her hand. In the next moment she slashed forward. Qi! A wisp of sword qi pierced through the air. Sword qi tore through the sky, instantly shattering the white-haired old man's powerful pressure. The white-haired old man punched forward. This fist forced Seven's sword energy to stop. But in the next moment, Seven appeared in front of the white-haired old man. Xiaoqi drew his sword and slashed. Boom! Under everyone's gaze, Seven had unknowingly appeared behind the white-haired old man. Everyone looked at the white-haired old man, and the latter said softly, To think that there would be such a monstrous person in this world. As soon as he finished speaking, he vanished completely. Seeing this scene, the faces of all the Immortal Cloud sect experts below instantly turned pale. In the air, Seven looked at the sect master of Immortal Cloud sect. For billion or the annihilation of Immortal Cloud sect. Choose. The sect master of Immortal Cloud sect had an extremely ugly expression. For billion. It could be said that the entire Immortal Cloud sect did not have that many god crystals. At this moment, Seven's palm suddenly opened. In the next moment, a sword suddenly flew out. 100 feet away, the head of an Immortal Cloud sect emperor expert flew out. He could not retaliate at all. Seeing this scene, the sect master of Immortal Cloud sect's expression changed drastically. At this moment, Seven looked at the sect master of Immortal Cloud sect. Seeing this scene, the latter's expression changed drastically. Give, we will give. Seven nodded slightly. I will give you an hour. After saying that, she retreated to Yi Xian's side. The sect master of Immortal Cloud sect hurriedly turned and left. Yi Xian said with a smile. Do you think he will run? 7 said indifferently. Unless he wants to completely give up on Immortal Cloud sect. As she said that, she looked at Yi Xian. It seems like a lot of people want that treasure of yours. Yi Xian nodded. There are a lot of them. 7 said softly. You might have a lot of troubles in the future, but it's fine. Yi Xian was a little curious. Why is it fine? 7 said. Because you have too many troubles. What does it matter if there are a little more? Yi Xian. At this moment, the sect master of Immortal Cloud sect appeared in front of 7 and Yi Xian. The sect master of Immortal Cloud sect hesitated for a moment before tapping with his finger. 10 storage rings landed in front of 7 and Yi Xian. This is all the wealth of my Immortal Cloud sect. Yi Xian took a look. There were 7 billion god crystals in the storage rings. Among them, there were 9 Dao realm treasures, 9 bottles of various elixirs, and some natural treasures. 7 billion. 9 Dao realm treasures. Yi Xian thought about it, and took out 5 storage rings for 7. However, 7 shook her head. I like these worldly possessions more. You keep them. Worldly possessions. Yi Xian was speechless. Seeing that 7 insisted, he didn't say anything else, and kept the storage rings. One had to say that it was really good to have a rich friend. After Yi Xian kept the storage rings, he turned around and left with 7. The 2 of them didn't really want Immortal Cloud sect to take out 4 billion god crystals, as they definitely didn't have that much. Seeing the 2 of them leave, the sect master of Immortal Cloud sect's expression instantly turned sinister. You Yi Xian? As he spoke, he turned to look at an old man. Inform the people from Xianhuang Great World. Just say. Right at this moment, a man suddenly appeared behind the sect master of Immortal Cloud sect. In the next instant, a sword pierced into the back of the sect master's neck. Fresh blood splattered. This man was Yi Xian. Yi Xian grinned. I knew that you definitely wouldn't be willing. As he spoke, he held his sword horizontally. Chi. The sect master of Immortal Cloud sect's head instantly flew out. Yi Xian kept his sword and turned around, disappearing not far away. On the spot, the group of Immortal Cloud sect experts were dumbfounded. In the distant starry sky, on the Imperial starship, 7 said softly. You knew that he wouldn't be willing? Yi Xian nodded. How could he be willing? We took away all the treasures of Immortal Cloud sect. 7 looked at Yi Xian. Were we cruel? Yi Xian shook his head. If we were weak, our outcome would be worse. 7 nodded. She raised her head and looked into the distance, saying softly, in the eyes of those people from Xianhuang Great World, we are also weaklings. Yi Xian smiled and was about to speak. At this moment, the starry sky in the distance was suddenly torn apart. Immediately after, a figure flew out from within. It was a woman in black. After the woman in black came out, her gaze landed on Yi Xian and 7. At this moment, an old man appeared behind her. The old man looked at the woman in black coldly. Continue running. The woman in black walked in front of Yi Xian and 7. Her gaze landed on 7. Save me. 7 was expressionless. Reason. The woman in black hesitated for a moment before opening her right hand. In her right hand, there was a black dragon roar. This is my Han country's Imperial Jade Seal. There are my Han country's treasures within. 7 shook her head. I'm not interested in money. Yi Xian. The woman in black was stunned. She hesitated for a moment before saying, why don't you take a look first? 7 shook her head. At this moment, the old man not far away suddenly sneered. Does she dare to interfere in the matters of my Xianhuang Great World? Xianhuang Great World. Yi Xian and 7 were stunned. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly took the Imperial Jade Seal from the woman in black's hands. Lady, don't worry. In broad daylight, I will definitely not allow anyone to kill in front of me. As he said this, he looked at the old man. Good and evil will always be repaid. Tendo reincarnate. If you don't believe, look up and see who will the heavens spare. Old man, I advise you to be kind. The old man looked at Yi Xian coldly. Just as he was about to speak, Yi Xian suddenly disappeared. Wang. A A sword's hum resounded. The old man's pupils constricted as he punched forward. Rumble! A powerful fist force forced Yi Xian's sword to stop. But in the next moment, Yi Xian punched directly at his face. Burial fist. Bang! In an instant, the old man retreated explosively for thousands of meters. As soon as he stopped, Yi Xian appeared in front of him again and slashed down with his sword. The old man roared furiously as he suddenly folded his hands in front of him. Rumble! The surrounding space suddenly trembled. Yi Xian returned to his original position, while the old man retreated explosively for thousands of meters. Moreover, a trace of blood flowed slowly from the corner of his mouth. The old man stared fixedly at Yi Xian. You! At this moment, two flying swords suddenly appeared in front of him. The old man's eyes narrowed slightly as he blasted his fist forward. Rumble! The sword radiance was shattered. However, Yi Xian showed up over his head without any sign the next second. Then a sword was swung straight down. The old man's expression changed drastically when he saw this attack, and he flashed backward and avoided it. However, he'd only just stopped when a few more flying swords appeared in front of him again. In the next moment, countless rays of light instantly enveloped him. Hiss! 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 The sound of numerous rays of light slicing resounded incessantly. Suddenly, the old man's furious shout resounded from within the rays of light, and then a powerful aura swept out and instantly shattered Yi Xian's rays of light. Moreover, Yi Xian had suddenly vanished. Hiss! Not too far away, a sword stabbed into the center of the old man's forehead. The surroundings fell silent. The old man stared fixedly at Yi Xian. How audacious of you! How dare you interfere in my Skyearth world? Meanwhile, Yi Xian raised his hand and swung his sword. Hiss! The old man's head flew into the air. Yi Xian's face remained emotionless as he took the old man's spatial ring. And then he turned around to gaze at the black-clothed young woman. The black-clothed young woman spoke solemnly. Is there enmity between all of you and the members of Skyearth world? Yi Xian nodded. The black-clothed young woman spoke solemnly. They're plundering our Dark Heaven continent right now. Yi Xian frowned slightly. The Dark Heaven continent? The black-clothed young woman gazed at Yi Xian. The treasures they possess are beyond your imagination. Yi Xian spoke with a serious expression on his face. Do you have some sort of misunderstanding towards me? I'm really not a greedy person. The black-clothed young woman was at a loss for words. P.S. Actually, I'm not a greedy person. I just like the feeling of receiving monthly passes from all of you. I don't really like such vulgar things. As someone who writes books, all I want to do is write them well. I've never cared about monthly passes or rewards. Really, I feel that monthly passes and money are vulgar. All of you know that I'm not a vulgar person. Chapter 655. The black-robed lady looked at Yi Xian. I'm telling the truth. They're currently plundering our mysterious heaven continent without the slightest scruple. Before coming to our mysterious heaven continent, they've already plundered several universes. Yi Xian asked. They are plundering without restraint. She nodded. Northern Army. This is an army from Xuanhuan Great World. This army often plunder resources from small worlds and universes. Everywhere they go, there is nothing left. Yi Xian frowned. So arrogant. Arrogant? The black-clothed woman sneered. And this is just an outer legion. You don't know their main legion. Their main legion is the real arrogant ones. Wherever they go, those who obey them will prosper, and those who oppose them will die. Yi Xian went silent for a moment before looking at Seven. Seven was expressionless. Kill. Yi Xian smiled. Just what I wanted. He then looked at the black-shirt lady. Lead the way. She said solemnly. Just the two of you? Yi Xian nodded. Just the two of us. She shook her head. If it is just the two of you, you will be sending yourselves to death. Yi Xian smiled. Why? She said, they have many people and are strong. Yi Xian said, you don't have to worry about that. Lead the way. The black-clothed woman looked deeply at Yi Xian and Xiao Qi before leading the way. On the way, Yi Xian looked at the jade seal in his hand. What is this? The woman in black had a complicated expression on her face. The jade seal of my Han Empire. Yi Xian asked. You said that there are treasures inside. She nodded. Yes. Yi Xian asked. How do I open it? She wanted to say something but stopped. Yi Xian smiled. Why? You can't bear to part with it now? The black-clothed woman sighed softly. The rest of the treasures in my Han kingdom have basically been looted. Only this jade seal is left, and within this jade seal, there is a supreme divine grade dragon vein. Super divine grade. Not far away, Seven suddenly said. Transcendent god grade? The black-clothed woman nodded. Transcendent divine grade. Seven looked at Yi Xian. This thing is okay. My god country only has one. Yi Xian flicked his finger, and the jade seal flew in front of Xiaoqi. For you. Seven shook her head. No. Yi Xian asked, why? Seven said, keep it. You don't even have one. When he heard this, Yi Xian's heart felt warm. He smiled and was about to say something when Seven said, if I say no then no. Just as Yi Xian was about to speak, Xiao Linger appeared in front of Yi Xian. The sixth floor said that they can give this to me. If I put it in the pagoda, there will be a lot of spiritual qi in the pagoda. My spirit tree can absorb it. And so can Xiao Ta. Yi Xian asked, Senior, is that so? He didn't really trust this little Linger. He didn't know where this girl learned to lie from. Sometimes she would lie. The sixth floor said, yes. Your pagoda needs spiritual qi too. A dragon vein of this level is good for the pagoda. Yi Xian nodded and passed the seal to Xiao Linger. Xiao Linger grinned and hugged the seal before returning to the prison pagoda. In just a moment, a white dragon appeared on the second floor. Transcendent divine grade dragon vein. Along with the appearance of this dragon vein, the spiritual qi in the prison pagoda became denser. He could sense that Xiao Ta was getting excited. Of course, the most excited one was Xiao Linger, because the dragon vein would be of great help to the spirit trees she planted. Outside the prison pagoda, the black-clothed woman beside Yi Xian suddenly said, I feel like you don't understand their strength. Yi Xian smiled and didn't say anything. Black-yellow great world. He knew that this world must be extremely powerful, because this force had been sucking the blood of other universes. Under such circumstances, the people of black-yellow great world must be getting stronger and stronger. The black-clothed woman said in a low voice. Why do you want to go against the people of black-yellow great world? Yi Xian collected his thoughts and smiled. We have some grudges with them. Saying so, he looked into the distance. How long until we arrive? The black-clothed woman said, An hour. Yi Xian said softly. How many people are there in the army from black-yellow great world? The black-clothed woman said, Only 100. 100. Yi Xian looked at the black-clothed woman and was stunned. 100 can destroy your black-blue great world. The black-clothed woman's face was ugly. The strength of these 100 people is beyond your imagination. Yi Xian said in a low voice. All of them are in the Emperor realm? The black-clothed woman shook her head. There are only about 30 Emperor realm, but they are extremely powerful. Moreover, they are wearing the best equipment. Not only that, each of them has a Tendo realm celestial wolf demon beast. Saying so, she looked at Yi Xian. You will know how terrifying they are when you meet them later. Yi Xian nodded. Let's hope so. The black-clothed woman glanced at Yi Xian and didn't say anything. About 4 hours later, the black-clothed woman suddenly said, It's in front. Yi Xian and Xiaoqi looked up and saw a planet not far away. At this moment, this planet was emitting an extremely pungent smell of blood. Yi Xian frowned. They won't massacre the people of your continent, right? The black-clothed woman was expressionless. That's what they did. Hearing this, Xiaoqi frowned. Even ordinary people? The black-clothed woman nodded. What they mean is to cut the weeds and eliminate the roots. Eliminate the weeds and eliminate the roots. Xiaoqi shook her head. Inhumane. Although God Nation had waged war, they hadn't slaughtered the weak. The actions of the black-yellow great world were inhumane. They were purely plundering. At this moment, Xiaoqi suddenly said, Kill them all. Yi Xian looked at Xiaoqi. Needless to say, this little girl was angry. In next to no time, the three of them entered the Xiansong continent. As soon as they entered, Yi Xian and Xiaoqi frowned. The smell of blood. The smell of blood in this universe was too strong. Needless to say, many people had definitely died. At this moment the black-clothed woman said, "Let's go to Han. Han is the most prosperous place in our Xiansong continent. They must be there." Yi Xian nodded. "Lead the way." The black-clothed woman's figure trembled and flashed towards the distance. In next to no time, the three of them arrived at the imperial capital of Han. Before they even entered the city, a monstrous smell of blood assaulted their faces. Yi Xian looked towards the city. From the sky, the city was covered in corpses. It was really a field of corpses and rivers of blood. This was a massacre. At this moment, an armored man appeared in front of Yi Xian and the other two. When he saw the black-clothed woman beside Yi Xian, the armored man grinned. "This woman is so beautiful, haha." As soon as he finished speaking, he charged towards the black-clothed woman. The black-clothed woman looked coldly at the armored man and did not dodge. And just when the armored man was a few feet away from the black-clothed woman, his head suddenly flew off. Blood spurted out like a fountain. The man's eyes were wide open, and there was disbelief in his eyes. The black-clothed woman turned to look at Yi Xian, her eyes filled with shock. Yi Xian and Xiaoqi walked towards the city. Along the way, there were corpses everywhere, and many of them were children. Cruel. Yi Xian's face was as gloomy as still water. He had also killed people, but he had never laid his hands on children, women, and children. Killing the weak would only make one look incompetent. And he did not expect that some people could be so cruel. And once these people entered the chaotic universe, it was hard to imagine what would happen to the chaotic universe. At this moment, a middle-aged man holding a spear suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian and the other two. The middle-aged man looked at Yi Xian and the other two. "You are." Just as the middle-aged man said this, Yi Xian suddenly disappeared. Wang. The sound of a sword suddenly shook the sky. Boom. Before the middle-aged man could react, he was sent flying. And the moment he was sent flying, a sword flashed past his throat. Chi. The middle-aged man's head flew off. Impudent. At this moment, an angry roar suddenly came from the sky. Then a powerful aura swept over from the sky. And at this moment, Xiaoqi suddenly disappeared. Wang. The sound of a sword soared into the sky. In an instant, Xiaoqi returned to her original position. But this time, there was a bloody head at her feet. Seeing this scene, the black-clothed girl nearby was completely stunned. This Yi Xian and Xiaoqi's strength had far exceeded her expectations. Rumble, rumble, rumble. At this moment, the ground not far away suddenly trembled. Soon a powerful pressure came from the distant streets. Yi Xian looked into the distance. There, 100 cavalrymen riding Sky Wolf were charging towards them. One had to admit that the aura of these 100 people was very powerful. It could be said that they were not any weaker than Xiaoqi's guards. Yi Xian took a step forward and rotated his right foot. In an instant, the power of the earth gathered around him. Yi Xian slowly clenched his right hand, and a powerful aura suddenly gathered around him. At this moment, the cavalrymen were only 10 feet away from him. The powerful aura was suffocating. All of a sudden, Yi Xian took a step forward and threw a punch. Burial fist. Rumble. With this punch, a monstrous aura swept out from Yi Xian's fist. In an instant, the entire Han city shook violently, as if there was a huge earthquake. And in front of Yi Xian's group, the 100 cavalrymen were forced to a stop by the power and aura of this punch. At this moment, Yi Xian's group was in a mess. If it wasn't for the aura of the 100 cavalrymen, Yi Xian's punch could have destroyed the entire Han city. Burial fist. There was no doubt about its power. In front of Yi Xian, a middle-aged man riding a sky wolf walked out. The sky wolf under him glared angrily at Yi Xian, and its eyes were blood red as if it wanted to devour Yi Xian. The middle-aged man looked at Yi Xian and was about to speak. But not far away, Yi Xian suddenly said, "Don't say anything. Either you kill me, or I kill all of you." As soon as he finished speaking, he lightly stomped his right foot and shot out like a sword. Chapter 656. Kill. The moment Yi Xian charged out, a wave of sword light enveloped the group of people. The Northern Army didn't back down in the slightest. Kill, the general in the lead bellowed, and 100 people charged out in unison. 7 raised her head and looked into the sky. In the next moment she charged up into the sky. The girl in black glanced at Yi Xian in the distance, then turned and left. In the distance, Yi Xian charged straight into the group of 100 people. Among them, there were 7 great emperors, while the rest were at least at the mastery realm. One had to admit that these 100 people were very strong. With their combined strength, they were able to suppress Yi Xian. If it was a one-on-one fight, Yi Xian could kill anyone in a second. But when they teamed up, there was nothing he could do. Boom! At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly retreated several hundred meters. As soon as he stopped, several spears pierced through the air toward him. Yi Xian slashed forward with the executing heaven sword. Tch! The spears were shattered in an instant. At the same time, he took a step forward and punched out. Fist of burial. Rumble. In an instant, the dozen or so soldiers charging at him were pulverized into mincemeat. But the next moment a spear stabbed into his forehead. Bang! Yi Xian retreated dozens of meters. The spear hadn't broken through his defenses. His physical body was at the level of a great emperor. Yi Xian stomped his right foot and turned into a wave of sword light that shot forward. Tch! Nearby, several soldiers' heads flew into the air. But soon, Yi Xian was forced back again. But in the blink of an eye, he was once again charging at the group of soldiers. The number of northern region soldiers on the battlefield was dwindling, and Yi Xian was killing a soldier with every passing moment. Kill. There was only one thought in Yi Xian's mind, and that was to kill. He had no good feelings toward the people from Black Origin Great World at all. When the people from Black Origin Great World came looking for him, it was already destined that they would oppose each other. Either you die or I live. The more Yi Xian killed, the fewer Northern Army soldiers there were. Now there were less than 50 of them left. Yi Xian had already killed half of them. As for Yi Xian, not only was his physique at the Emperor realm, but he was also wearing a Dao realm defensive treasure. Although he was injured, it wasn't fatal. Bang! Right at this moment, Yi Xian was suddenly pushed back by the joint forces of over a dozen people. After Yi Xian was pushed back, the leader of the Northern Army suddenly shouted, "Retreat! Retreat!" They no longer wanted to continue fighting with Yi Xian, because they had already lost too many people. And this Yi Xian, not only did he not weaken, he instead became stronger. Therefore, he decisively chose to retreat. The remaining dozens of Northern Army soldiers turned around and left. However, Yi Xian had no intention of giving up. With a shake of his body, he charged toward the Northern Army. The leader of the Northern Army's expression changed when he saw this. Hurry to the teleportation formation. With that, everyone sped up and rushed out of the city. Behind them, people were dying at every moment. Yi Xian was fast, but his sword was even faster. A flying sword followed closely behind the Northern Army, like a maggot on a tarsal bone. Before long, the Northern Army arrived at a teleportation formation. As soon as they jumped onto it, a blue light enveloped them. At this moment, a tiny empty character suddenly appeared between Yi Xian's brows. Space Dao Law. In the next moment, the space around the Northern Army was changed by Yi Xian. This change made the teleportation formation lose its effectiveness. Sensing this, the Northern Army's expressions turned extremely ugly. The leader of the Northern Army glared at Yi Xian, who was walking toward them from afar. "Do you know who we are? We are the subordinates of the Northern King of the Xuanhuan Great World." Yi Xian suddenly grinned. "Do you know who I am?" The leader stared at Yi Xian. "Who are you?" Yi Xian smiled. "My name is Yi Xian, and I specialize in killing people from your Xuanhuan Great World." With that, he suddenly disappeared. The cry of a sword abruptly resounded in the battlefield. Nearby, the leader's expression turned ferocious. "Kill!" A group of people dashed towards Yi Xian as soon as they finished speaking. An hour later, Yi Xian lay on the ground, and corpses were everywhere around him. Not a single one of the 100 Northern Army soldiers had survived. All of them had been cleanly slaughtered by him. On the ground, Yi Xian quietly looked at the sky. A faint red glow was emitting from his body. It wasn't the power of his bloodline. It was the demonic nature in his body. Ever since he had turned into a demon, his demonic nature had grown stronger and stronger. And he himself had also discovered this point. However, he didn't think it was a bad thing. Demonic nature was also human nature. He didn't regret slaughtering the Northern Army at all. Or rather, it felt great. Too great. Just at this moment, a sword cry came from the horizon. In the next moment, Xiaoqi appeared beside him. Xiaoqi glanced at Yi Xian. Are you okay? Yi Xian nodded. 7 said. Just now, there was someone who exceeded Emperor Realm, and I killed him. But he seems to be calling for help. Calling for help? Yi Xian grinned. That's good. Xiaoqi nodded. I have an idea. Yi Xian said. Speak. Xiaoqi said softly. It's a waste of time to find them like this. Why don't we let them find us? Yi Xian said with a smile. Great. Xiaoqi nodded. Then she opened her palm. There was a storage ring in her palm. A black storage ring. Xiaoqi passed it to Yi Xian. For you, Yi Xian said seriously. I am not a greedy person. Xiaoqi looked at Yi Xian. I know. Yi Xian asked. Really? Xiaoqi nodded. You are poor, too poor. I understand you. Yi Xian. A moment later, Yi Xian started to clear his spoils of war. Over 100 storage rings. Looking at the 100-odd storage rings in front of him, Yi Xian grinned from ear to ear. Finally he counted them. Along with the ones in front of him, he had a total of 7 billion god crystals, 52 Dao realm treasures and some miscellaneous items. Of course, there was also the transcendent grade god meridian in the tower. Close to 5 billion god crystals. Yi Xian exclaimed. He had never seen so much money in his life. He didn't earn this money. He got it from killing people. He, Yi Xian, killed people based on who they were. But these people from Xianhuang Great World didn't. To them, the world outside of Xianhuang Great World was a target for them to plunder. One could imagine how rich the people in that world were. Right at that moment, the black-robed girl appeared in front of Yi Xian and Xiaoqi. Behind her was a boy who was around 6 or 7 years old. His face was a little pale, but there was no fear in his eyes. The black-robed girl looked at the corpses all over the place, and then at Yi Xian and Xiaoqi. Thank you. Xiaoqi looked at the black-robed girl. How many people are left here? The black-robed girl said solemnly. A few. Xiaoqi said. Bring them to the chaotic universe. There will be people there to settle you. Chaotic universe? The black-robed girl was stunned. You are from the chaotic universe? Xiaoqi nodded. Have you heard of it? The black-robed girl said solemnly. Yes, I heard that a 5th-dimensional treasure appeared there. Yi Xian, the black-robed girl said. The people from Xianhuang Great World won't let the chaotic universe off. Xiaoqi looked at her. I am still alive. Who dares to bully my people? The black-robed girl looked at Xiaoqi. Can all of us go to the chaotic universe? Xiaoqi nodded. Yes, but you must have your own value. Do you understand? The black-robed girl said solemnly. We have many factions and sects here. They are all hidden. If we go to your side, Xiaoqi said, bring your martial path civilization there. When you go there, people will find you and communicate with you. Of course, when you go there, you will be people of my god country, and have to follow the rules there. Do you understand? The black-robed girl nodded. Understood. Xiaoqi pointed and a white light entered her brow. This is the route. Go. The black-robed girl nodded, and then pulled the boy away. At that moment the boy looked at Yi Xian. Did you just kill all of them? Yi Xian nodded. The boy looked at Yi Xian. How can I become as outstanding as you? When he heard this, Yi Xian was delighted. This fellow really knew how to speak. Yi Xian got up and walked up to the little boy. He opened his palm, and a Dao-level sword appeared in his hand. He handed the sword to the little boy. Work hard to become stronger, and protect the people around you. Do you understand? The boy took the sword and looked at Yi Xian. I will work hard. After saying this, he turned around and left with the black-robed girl. Very quickly, the people of this continent started to move towards the chaotic universe. Xiaoqi looked into the sky and said softly, "Their people should be here soon." Yi Xian stood beside Xiaoqi. "The enemy will get stronger and stronger." Xiaoqi was expressionless. "One day, I will stab my sword into Xianhuang Great World." Yi Xian looked at Xiaoqi. Xiaoqi said, "I hate Xianhuang Great World, so they should disappear." Yi Xian was speechless. At that moment, Xiaoqi looked at Yi Xian. "Xianhuang Great World has done so much evil. Am I doing this to enforce justice on behalf of the heavens?" Yi Xian thought about it and said, "You can say that." Xiaoqi nodded. "Actually, I am a good person." Yi Xian's expression became weird. This Xiaoqi, at that moment, the demon lord's voice suddenly resounded. "It's over. This girl has been with you for so long, and her personality has started to change." At this moment, the space in front of the two suddenly split open, and a middle-aged man walked out. The middle-aged man glanced at Yi Xian and Xiaoqi, and in the next moment, he looked at the corpses at their feet. After a moment of silence, he said, "Sorry to disturb you. I was just passing by." With that, he turned around and returned to the spatial crack. Yi Xian was speechless. Chapter 657. The middle-aged man had vanished. Yi Xian and Xiaoqi looked at each other. The middle-aged man's actions left them a little dumbfounded. "He's leaving just like that?" Xiaoqi suddenly said, "Wait." Yi Xian nodded. It didn't take long for the space before them to be torn apart again. And then the middle-aged man had appeared once more. This time, there were two more people behind him. They were experts at the Godrank realm. The Godrank realm was above the Emperor realm. Yi Xian gazed at the middle-aged man and smiled. "Weren't you just passing by?" The middle-aged man gazed coldly at Yi Xian and Xiaoqi. "Who exactly are you?" Yi Xian didn't answer him. He gazed at Xiaoqi instead. "How many do you want to fight?" Xiaoqi thought for a moment and said, "All of them." As soon as she finished speaking, she suddenly vanished. Hiss! A ray of light tore through the air. The middle-aged man's expression changed. An extraordinary sword god. As soon as he finished speaking, Xiaoqi's sword arrived before him. Meanwhile, the middle-aged man and the other two attacked in unison. Hiss! 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 The middle-aged man and the other two were instantly enveloped by an expanse of light. 3 breaths of time later, Xiaoqi returned to Yi Xian's side, and only the middle-aged man remained not too far away from her. As for the other two Divine Crystal Realm experts, they'd fallen to the ground. The middle-aged man's face was extremely pale. Besides deep fear and terror, there was also terror in his eyes as he gazed at Xiaoqi. Who exactly are you?" Xiaoqi gazed at the middle-aged man. "Go back and get everyone else." The middle-aged man spoke fiercely. "Are you provoking my Skyearth world?" Xiaoqi nodded. "Aye." When she spoke up to this point, she glanced at Yi Xian and said, "The two of us will fight all of you. Go back and get everyone else." Yi Xian was speechless. The middle-aged man laughed fiercely, and then he turned around and left without saying anything. Yi Xian collected the corpses of the 2 divine crystal powerhouses and handed them over to the demon lord. These 2 divine crystal powerhouses had a total of 500 million divine crystals and 10 Tao realm treasures. Needless to say, the experts of Skyearth world were truly too wealthy. 7 suddenly said, "God realm is too weak." Yi Xian looked at 7 and she said softly, "Why are you so weak?" Meanwhile, the Fiend Lord's voice suddenly resounded. "Little girl, only now do you realize that there's always someone better out there. You're a monster, but there's someone even more monstrous than you. Even in the Xianhuang Great World, the reason why things are going so smoothly for you too is because that group of people doesn't fully understand you too. If they knew about your talents and combat strength, they wouldn't have sent these people." 7 nodded. "I know." As she spoke, she looked at the spatial crack in the distance. "They should have looked at us." Yi Xian thought for a moment, and then he said, "I think we should keep a low profile." 7 said, "But strength doesn't allow it." Yi Xian was speechless. The demon lord said softly, "You two little fellows." Right at this moment, the spatial rift in front of them suddenly trembled, and it wasn't long before an old man in a linen robe walked out from within it. The old man's body was ethereal. Obviously, it wasn't his true body. After the old man appeared, his gaze descended onto Seven, and his eyes suddenly flickered with golden light. A short while later, his expression gradually became solemn. Innate Sword Tao spiritual body, peak extraordinary sword god, peak imperial realm. When he spoke up to this point, he took a step forward while the golden light in his eyes turned violet. A short while later, his expression became extremely solemn. Tao spiritual root, innate spiritual intelligence. As he spoke, his face had turned pale. Meanwhile, the old man took another step forward while the violet light in his eyes turned black and white. A long time passed before his hands started to tremble. The fate of a human king. Karmic luck of the grand Tao. How could this be possible? This is impossible. It's completely impossible. As he spoke, he took a few dozen steps back. A human king. What was a human king? At the beginning of the fourth dimension, the universe was in chaos. At that time, humans had just appeared and were weak. In the end, a human king appeared. That was the first human king in human history, she. This human king, she led the human race to fight against the Tendo, the demon race, and the myriad of races in the universe. He also founded the human race's civilization, martial arts civilization, and established various human systems. It could be said that the human race's civilization began with this human king Shi. After that, a few more human kings appeared in the human race. These human kings were all geniuses, and they brought the human race to an even higher peak. In that era, the human king was higher than the Tendo, and even higher than the legendary heavenly gods. The last human king of the human race was called Zhou. This human king failed to fight against the Tendo and heavenly gods. After that, the human race no longer had a human king, only the Son of Heaven. The Son of Heaven. The Son of Heaven. After Zhou, the human race was ruled by the Tendo and some ancient heavenly gods. It was also after that the Tendo was supreme, and the divine power was supreme. The reason why the old man was shocked was because he saw the fate of a human king on Seven. What did this mean? It meant that this little girl could very well become a human king. Once this little girl became a human king, it must be known that although the human kings had already disappeared, these human kings still had countless followers behind them. Even the fourth dimension's Tendo and those ancient heavenly gods did not dare to look down on them. If those people knew that a new human king had appeared in this world, the old man could not imagine what would happen. Nowadays, many people only knew about the Son of Heaven and emperors. No one knew about the human king, but some of the ancient monsters knew about it. The old man stared at Seven. After a moment, he turned around and was about to leave. At this time, Yi Xian, who was not far away, suddenly said, "Don't you want to look at me?" The old man turned around and looked at Yi Xian. His eyes emitted a purple light. After a moment, he shook his head. Wasting old man Xian Qi. After saying that, he turned around and entered the spatial crack. In his original position, Yi Xian flew into a rage. "What did you say? Don't you mother f***er leave?" After saying that, he raised his sword and rushed over. But when he rushed to the spatial crack, it suddenly disappeared. Yi Xian was infuriated and slashed down with his sword. Qi. That space was directly shattered by him. At this time, Seven looked at Yi Xian. "Don't care about what others think." Yi Xian shrugged. "Actually, I'm not angry." At this time, the demon lord's voice sounded. "From your appearance, your talent is indeed not top-notch, but..." Yi Xian hurriedly asked. "But what?" The demon lord said. "But most of the time, talent is not the only standard to measure a person. Since ancient times, many outstanding people did not necessarily have good talent. The path of Tao relies more on one's own efforts and opportunities. Of course, your talent is not bad. He just can't see through you." Hearing this, Yi Xian laughed. Senior's vision is unique, not something those ordinary people can compare to. The demon lord. At this time, Seven suddenly said, "Looks like they won't be coming for a while. Let's go to their spatial stronghold to find them." Yi Xian nodded. "Okay." With that said, the two turned into a sword light and soared into the sky. After entering the starry sky, the two disappeared into the distant end of the galaxy on the Imperial starship. Target, the next spatial stronghold. On the Imperial starship, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground. Absorb. Among the spoils of war, there were 6 Dao realm swords. And now he wanted to take this opportunity to break through to the origin realm. When he recultivated in adversity, he stopped at this realm. And now, what he needed to do was to improve his realm. After a sword was inserted into his abdomen, a pure spiritual energy exploded from his body. Dao realm swords. How terrifying was the energy of this sword. Yi Xian began to absorb this energy madly, and gradually, a wave of aura spread out from his body. Not far away, 7 glanced at Yi Xian, then turned to look at the distant end of the starry sky. 3 days later, Yi Xian, who was sitting cross-legged on the ground, suddenly opened his eyes, and a wave of aura suddenly floated out from his mouth. Origin realm. At this moment, not far away, 7 suddenly said, "Look." Hearing this, Yi Xian looked up, and in the distant end of the starry sky, there was a long bridge. The bridge stretched across the starry sky, and the left and right sides could not see the end, and the bridge was empty, with gusts of cold wind blowing. It was quite strange. Yi Xian said softly, "What is this?" 7 shook her head. "Let's go take a look." Yi Xian nodded, and soon the two arrived in front of the bridge. As soon as they arrived, a wave of cold wind blew over. Yi Xian frowned slightly. "What is this?" 7 jumped onto the bridge, and as soon as she arrived, she frowned. At this moment, the demon lord's voice rang out in Yi Xian's mind. "This place is not normal, be careful." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression became serious. He looked around, and just as he was about to speak, a woman in red suddenly appeared in front of him and 7. The woman in red had a ferocious face, and she was a ghost body. 7 said softly, "Ghost." Yi Xian looked at the woman in red, and the latter was looking at him and 7 viciously. Yi Xian said solemnly, "She is not simple." 7 looked around with an indifferent expression. However, her left hand was holding onto the sword by her waist. Just at this moment, another soul appeared behind them. Yi Xian turned around and his expression changed. That was because in front of him was a dense mass of souls. At this moment, the entire bridge was filled with souls. These souls were all extremely ferocious, and they didn't look like normal souls. At this moment, 7 suddenly said, "They are nurturing evil souls." Yi Xian looked at 7, and she said softly, "There are some evil cultivation techniques recorded in the history books, and this evil soul nurturing is one of them. This bridge should be a god realm treasure, and someone is using it to nurture evil souls." After saying this, she looked around. "Let's go." Yi Xian nodded his head. The two of them were about to leave when a voice rang out from the bridge. "You want to leave? Isn't it too late?" The moment the voice landed, numerous evil souls charged towards Yi Xian and 7. 7 frowned, and was about to attack. At this moment, Yi Xian stopped her. "Let me perform." 7 was speechless. "P.S. Did you misunderstand what I said yesterday? I like the feeling of you giving me monthly tickets. I didn't tell you not to send me. You can't twist my words." Chapter 658. Souls. It could be said that the thing that Yi Xian feared the least was souls. Regardless of whether it was the soul-suppressing sword or his soul-setting sword, both of them were absolutely effective against soul-type creatures. Looking at the incoming souls, Yi Xian opened his palm, and the soul-suppressing sword appeared in his hand. In the next instant, the soul-suppressing sword flew out. Wung! A sword hum rang out from the bridge. The moment the soul-suppressing sword appeared, the souls on the bridge revealed expressions of shock and fear. At the same time, a voice rang out. "Soul-suppressing sword. You actually have the soul-suppressing sword. You." A strong force suddenly dashed towards Yi Xian as soon as he finished speaking. 7 frowned. She raised her hand and slashed to the right. Hong! With a slash of the sword, an afterimage retreated several thousand feet in front of Xiao Qi. Xiao Qi looked into the distance. and a few hundred meters in front of her, there was a skinny old man. He was hunched over, and he only had one eye. He held a black banner in his hand. The old man stared at Shaoqi. Transcendent sword god. Shaoqi sized up the old man. Ugly. Yi Xian was speechless. It had to be said that the old man was truly ugly, especially his face. There were many black warts on it, and he looked extremely disgusting. However, it was a little hurtful for Shaoqi to say it so directly. As expected, the old man's face turned savage. Little girl, do you know who the person in front of you is? Shaoqi lowered her head. I don't want to look at you. Impudent. The old man was enraged, and he suddenly disappeared, and a powerful aura swept toward Shaoqi. Shaoqi raised her hand and slashed out. Hong. The old man was sent back to his original position. The old man looked at Shaoqi, shocked and furious. You. Shaoqi turned to look at Yi Xian, and she glanced at Yi Xian. You look more pleasing to the eye. Yi Xian was speechless. At this moment, the soul-suppressing sword in Yi Xian's hand was still frantically devouring the surrounding evil souls. The soul-suppressing sword was very excited. Young lord, these souls are great nourishment. I will definitely be able to advance. Advancement? The divine realm? Yi Xian said softly. Then absorb more. The soul-suppressing sword said, all right. At this moment, the skinny old man in the distance suddenly retreated a few dozen meters. Then, he clasped his hands together and began to chant something. Gradually, the bridge beneath Yi Xian's feet began to tremble violently. Soon, the evil spirits in the surroundings suddenly became violent. The soul-suppressing sword suddenly said, Young lord, these people's souls have all been refined into evil spirits. Yi Xian asked, Ferocious spirit? The soul-suppressing sword said, Yes, these people's souls will forever be his slaves, unable to be freed. It's very miserable. If I absorb them, I can free them. The violet-robed old man gazed at the old man. Ku Jin, you actually asked for guidance. The old man glanced at Shaoqi and said, Help me keep her busy. The old man glanced at Shaoqi and smiled. What's in it for me? Ku Jin spoke coldly. 500 million divine crystals. The old man chuckled. 1 billion. Ku Jin glanced at the old man. All right. The old man roared with laughter, and then he gazed at Shaoqi. He sized her up and said, I presume that you're a monstrous genius. Come, let me see how monstrous you are. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly vanished. An afterimage flashed across the battlefield. Shaoqi had an emotionless expression on her face as she suddenly vanished. A sword howl suddenly tore through the sky. In an instant, the violet-robed old man moved 3 kilometers back. At the same time, one of his arms had vanished. After the old man stopped moving, he gazed at Shaoqi with terror. You. When he spoke up to hear, he suddenly turned around to gaze at Ku Jin, and he roared furiously. You tricked the old man. Ku Jin remained silent. He noticed that this little girl's strength was much stronger than he'd imagined. She was too formidable. Ku Jin glanced at Shaoqi, and then he turned around and left. He didn't hesitate at all. The old man was both shocked and furious when he saw Ku Jin flee, and he hurriedly turned around and left as well. Shaoqi was about to chase after him. Meanwhile, her beautiful brows knit together slightly, and she turned around to look at Yi Xian. At this moment, countless souls were surging towards the soul-suppressing sword that stood before Yi Xian. As it absorbed more and more souls, the aura emanated by the soul-suppressing sword had practically multiplied by a few times. Shaoqi's brows knit together slightly, because the bridge beneath her and Yi Xian had suddenly started trembling. Danger! Shaoqi walked over to Yi Xian's side. Suddenly, the entire bridge exploded apart. Both Yi Xian and Shaoqi had vanished. Not long after Yi Xian and Shaoqi vanished, a middle-aged man appeared here. And there were 2 old men behind him. One of the old men was Ku Jin from before. Ku Jin glanced at the surroundings, and his face was filled with bewilderment. They were here just now. The middle-aged man glanced at the surroundings and said, Are you sure that little girl has attained the extraordinary sword god realm? Ku Jin nodded, and his expression gradually became solemn. Absolutely. The middle-aged man spoke softly. This ruler isn't simple at all. Ku Jin gazed at the middle-aged man. General Feng Yi, we must eliminate these two people if we want to conquer the chaotic universe. The middle-aged man glanced at Ku Jin. Are you going to kill them? Ku Jin's expression changed slightly, and he hurriedly lowered his head. He was one of the 3 peerless generals under the command of the king of the northern region. A peerless general. Every single one of them was an extraordinary expert that guarded an entire region in the universe. Regardless of whether it was in terms of individual strength or ability to lead troops, they were top-rate existences. However, this person before him was in charge of 100,000 troops of the northern region, and his status was extremely respected in the northern territory of the universe. The middle-aged man called Feng Yi raised his head and looked towards the distance, and he spoke softly. That little girl has the fate of a mortal king. He can't be allowed to live. The fate of a mortal king. Ku Jin's expression changed. She has the fate of a mortal king? Feng Yi paid no attention to Ku Jin, and he turned his head slightly to the side. Summon all the expeditionary forces. They must arrive in the starry sky of the chaotic universe within a day. Anyone who doesn't arrive will be killed regardless of the reason. As he spoke, he paused for a moment before he continued. Immediately gather all the information on the divine king of the chaotic universe. It isn't just her. I want all the information on the divine kingdom since the beginning. The old man bowed slightly, and then he left silently. Feng Yi gazed towards the distant starry sky and spoke softly. It's going to be a tough battle. As soon as he finished speaking, he'd vanished. After the bridge suddenly exploded, Yi Xian and Xiao Qi appeared on the surface of a river. It was dark around them, and the water was murky. Not far in front of them stood an old woman. The old woman was boiling soup. The fragrance of the soup was extremely alluring. Yi Xian looked at the old woman. Senior, you are? The old woman scooped a bowl of soup, and then she looked at Yi Xian and Xiao Qi, and she grinned. Have a bowl of soup. Her smile was somewhat terrifying. Yi Xian glanced at the bowl of soup, and he shook his head. No, I won't drink it. The old woman suddenly appeared in front of Xiao Qi and Yi Xian, and she looked at them. Drink this soup, and forget about your past life, and forget about this life. How great is that? As she spoke, she passed the soup to Xiao Qi. Xiao Qi looked at the bowl of soup, and at this moment, a scene suddenly appeared in the soup. In a turbid world, a woman in a plain dress stood quietly on top of the clouds. She looked down at the bottom of the clouds with an expressionless face. Not far away from her right stood another woman. The woman stared at the woman in the plain dress in rage. You're crazy. The woman in the plain dress suddenly placed her sword on the woman's forehead, and her expression was ferocious. Crazy? Have you forgotten how he died? As her voice landed, the sword stabbed in half an inch. The woman's blood flowed out. The woman stared at the woman in the plain dress. This isn't what he wants to see. The woman in the plain dress looked at the woman in the plain dress, and her expression became more and more ferocious. Then let him tell me personally. Other than him, no one can stop me. As her voice landed, she turned around and left. Behind her, the woman stared at the woman in the plain dress. This four-dimensional universe has countless living beings. In the distance, the woman in the plain dress didn't even turn her head. This four-dimensional universe isn't as important as a strand of his hair. Chapter 659. Above the clouds, it suddenly became silent. The woman stood there quietly and didn't speak for a long time. After a long time, the woman lowered her head. No one can stop her. At this moment, a voice rang out. Don't go. She will kill you. The woman said softly. He said that if we have the ability, we must protect the weak. That voice was silent. The woman looked below the clouds, her eyes slowly becoming a little dazed. I also want him to live. On the river, the scene stopped. In front of 7, the old woman's expression became extremely solemn. That woman in the plain dress. I have never seen such a strong swordsman. As she said that, She looked towards Seven. Drink this soup and end the karma of your past life. Seven asked, why should I end it? The old woman smiled. Why not end it? Seven looked at the old woman. My past life is my past life, I am me. I don't care about my past life, and I won't forget my past life. I am Seven, I am me. The old woman looked at Seven, and was about to speak. Suddenly her expression changed. She grabbed Seven's right hand and closed her eyes. After a moment she opened them. Her eyes were filled with disbelief. You actually have the fate of the human king. Seven frowned. Human king. The old woman looked at Seven deeply. Unbelievable. After so many years, someone with the fate of the human king has actually appeared. At the side, Yi Xian suddenly asked, what is human king? The old woman looked at Yi Xian. It is the king of the human race, on par with Tendo, on par with the ancient gods. Yi Xian asked, Emperor? The old woman suddenly raged. What emperor? An emperor is called the son of heaven. He is chosen by the heavens. Human king is the king of the human race. He is not restricted by the heavens and earth. On par with the heavens and earth. On par with the ancient gods. Do you understand? Yi Xian looked at the old woman. Senior, don't be agitated. I am just asking. The old woman slowly closed her eyes. Sad. The human race has actually forgotten the human king of the past. Yi Xian. At this time, the old woman looked at Yi Xian. If she doesn't drink, will you? Yi Xian asked. Can I see the past life in this soup? The old woman said. Sure. Yi Xian hurriedly said. Let me see what I was like in my previous life. The old woman looked at Yi Xian. She handed the bowl to Yi Xian. Just as Yi Xian looked at it, the bowl of soup suddenly exploded. Bang! The old woman instantly retreated 1,000 feet. Yi Xian was speechless. Seven blinked, and looked at Yi Xian curiously. In the distance, the old woman's expression was extremely ugly. How is this possible? With that, she appeared in front of Yi Xian again. She glared at Yi Xian. Who were you in your past life? Yi Xian helplessly said. What are you asking? How would I know who I was in my past life? With that, he said seriously. However, I feel that I was definitely a very powerful existence in my past life. I have no doubt about this. The old woman looked at Yi Xian. After a moment, she suddenly took out an ancient mirror and handed it to Yi Xian. Yi Xian looked at the ancient mirror. The mirror rippled like water. After a moment, the mirror suddenly shook violently. Soon a gray world appeared in the mirror. At this time, the mirror suddenly exploded. The old woman retreated again. Yi Xian. In the distance, the old woman's expression was extremely ugly. Impossible, absolutely impossible. With that, she looked at Yi Xian. Even if you are the reincarnation of a human king, you can't destroy this rebirth mirror. Yi Xian thought for a moment. Then he said, perhaps I am even more powerful than a human king. The old woman said angrily. T. In the history of the human race in the four-dimensional universe, human king is the strongest person. You. With that, she seemed to think of something. Her pupils suddenly shrank. You are not from the four-dimensional universe. Yi Xian was a little helpless. I don't know either. The old woman stared at Yi Xian. In the past, King Shi came into contact with people from the five-dimensional universe. Yi Xian was slightly stunned. People who came into contact with people from the five-dimensional universe? The old woman nodded. King Shi. With that she paused for a moment. Then she said, both of you are not simple. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment. Then he said, Senior, do you have any inheritance to pass down? The old woman looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian said seriously, if Senior needs it, I will definitely not refuse. Shao Qi suddenly pulled on Yi Xian's sleeve. Restrain yourself, Yi Xian. The old woman glanced at Yi Xian. Do you know who I am? Yi Xian shook his head. Senior, you are? The old woman turned around and pointed to a pitch-black door not far away. And above the door, there were two big black words, Hell. Hell. Yi Xian frowned. What is that? The old woman said calmly. In the past, not only did King Shi establish human civilization and various human systems, but he also established the reincarnation system. When humans die of old age, or when their lifespan is exhausted, their souls will enter a place. Yi Xian asked. Hell. The old woman nodded. After entering hell, you can drink the rebirth soup to end your past life and forget about this life. Then you can cultivate the next life. Later, when the last human king was killed, many things also disappeared, including this reincarnation system. With that, she looked at Yi Xian. Enter this door, and you can obtain the inheritance. Yi Xian hesitated and then asked, Is it dangerous? The old woman looked at Yi Xian. Guess. Yi Xian. At this moment the old woman looked at Xiaoqi. If you control this hell, you can use it to establish the reincarnation system. It was obvious that she wanted Xiaoqi to inherit this hell. This was because this hell was created by a human king. Xiaoqi's inheritance was the best. Xiaoqi looked at the door. Reincarnation system? The old woman nodded. There are 18 evil souls inside. They can all be used by you. Xiaoqi looked at Yi Xian. Do you want it? Yi Xian looked at the old woman. No, I don't want it. With that, he took out the world prism pagoda and sighed. Haze. I am only interested in the inheritance of the fifth dimension. I am not interested in anything else. The old woman looked at the world prism pagoda in Yi Xian's hands. Her expression was solemn. Fifth dimension item. Yi Xian said calmly. It is just a pagoda. It is not worth mentioning. It is not worth mentioning. With that, he kept the world prism pagoda. The old woman looked at Yi Xian. Then she looked at Xiaoqi. Go in. Xiaoqi nodded. She walked through the door. Only Yi Xian and the old woman were left. The old woman looked at Yi Xian. I have something that is suitable for you. But unfortunately, you said that you are only interested in fifth dimension items. Haze, Yi Xian. Roughly 2 hours later, Xiaoqi walked out. There was a blood-red mark on her forehead. The old woman looked at Xiaoqi. You succeeded? Xiaoqi nodded. The old woman asked. They didn't make things difficult for you? Xiaoqi looked at the old woman. She shook her head. They seemed happy. The old woman nodded. That's true. There won't be anyone better than you. Xiaoqi looked at the old woman. Are you coming with me? The old woman shook her head. I want to stay here. I don't want to care about the outside world. Xiaoqi nodded. She looked at Yi Xian. Let's go. Yi Xian nodded. The two of them were about to leave. At this moment the old woman suddenly said, Young man. Yi Xian turned to look at the old woman. She pointed with her finger. A black stone appeared in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian did not understand. This is? The old woman said. Soul stone. If you embed this stone on your sword, it can increase its rank by at least 2 levels. Not only that, this thing is the nemesis of all souls. This soul does not only refer to the souls of humans, but also the souls of all living beings in the 4-dimensional universe. Apart from that, it can also nourish your soul. All soul attacks and soul techniques are useless against you. Of course, this doesn't mean that you are invincible. If you meet some special experts like... Her expression became solemn. For example, that girl in the plain dress. In front of such people, all treasures are useless. Yi Xian bowed. Thank you. The old woman looked at Xiaoqi. This 4th dimension is no longer the human king era. Your appearance represents an anomaly. I'm afraid there will be many troubles in the future. Xiaoqi asked. What is there to be afraid of? The old woman looked at Xiaoqi for a long time. Finally she nodded. You have the fate of a human king. You can go and find those fellows from the human king era. I believe that many of them are still alive. Xiaoqi asked. Are they strong? The old woman nodded. Those who are still alive are either very weak or extremely strong. Xiaoqi nodded. I understand. The old woman looked at Xiaoqi. Take care. Xiaoqi and Yi Xian turned and left. In the field, the old woman was silent for a long time. Finally, she turned and walked into the distance. Not long later, she completely disappeared into the distance. Yi Xian and Xiaoqi returned to the starry sky. At this moment, the demon lord's voice suddenly rang in Yi Xian's mind. That person just now was very strong. Yi Xian asked in a deep voice. How strong? The demon lord said. slightly weaker than me. Yi Xian, the demon lord continued. Unfortunately, her body is gone. Moreover, her soul is incomplete. She should have been destroyed by someone. Otherwise, at her peak, she should be a peerless expert. Yi Xian said. Senior, do you know about the Human King era? The demon lord said. I've heard a little. However, it's just a little. I don't know much. If I'm not wrong, the history of that era should have been erased by someone or some force. Yi Xian nodded slightly. Just as he was about to speak, Xiaoqi suddenly frowned, and his expression turned cold. Yi Xian looked at Xiaoqi. Xiaoqi said, something has happened in the chaotic universe. P.S. Do you have any votes to vote for? If you do, please look at me. I will accept your votes without hesitation. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.